All right, well, thank you everybody for meeting again. Go over some of the stuff for Riverview. Really, today the intent was to give kind of a catch-up as to the progress of the drawings, maybe go over a couple of questions, and just keep this process moving forward in a positive direction. I did bring with me today Sterling Hunter from our office. He's been helping in a lot of the documents. He's one of our young, talented professionals, and I'm trying to work into more of these meetings and just kind of bring them up to speed on some of the other sides of the process other than documentation. So that's why he's here today. So I'm going to really run through these quick. There are a lot of drawings here. You can see me kind of panning down through the side. We're not going to go through all of those. Nobody would be happy with me if we did that, but I just do want to show kind of the process and what we're putting together here. So first sheet, we're ultimately going to have your title sheet. We will need to get all the information of all the important people, important organizations, all that kind of stuff that are related to the construction project that ultimately gets dumped in here. This is construction manager, who you want listed from the school side of things. This is kind of a record document, so ultimately all that information will need to be provided. This sheet will include all of our consultants, ourselves. This will have project maps and things of that nature, but it's kind of the setup for the rest of the drawing set. This page will be populated with all your drawings. There is not much listed yet. This is just the architectural set so far. Our mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, technology engineers are all working. We just have not dumped their information into this model yet, but this will be a nice, healthy list of drawings when we ultimately get there. Associated with any project, there's a code review sheet. We're going through that process. Early on, when we had some of our most preliminary conversations about doing an addition over at Riverview, there was a conversation of, well, from a code standpoint, and I say that a lot, really you need to go through and make sure that everything you're doing to the building still meets the requirements of the code from an egress standpoint, from fire rating standpoints, all of those sorts of things. That's what this sheet is designed to do. Gives you your building areas, your occupant loads, all those sorts of things, so that ultimately when this gets submitted to the building department, they have all the information they need in order to review a set. This will be very similar for CTE, so I'm probably not going to go over in as much detail for that project. I'm not going over that project at all today, but next time we have a conversation about that again. There are a couple of sheets for demo. There is not a lot of demolition in this project. It's really related to that connection end that we're talking about at the end of the corridor, that west corridor. There's the stair that will need to be reconfigured in order to get enough head clearance underneath the stair to get a door out to that kind of court space to the north within that kind of classroom cluster up there. And then there's the removal of the existing doors and the connection into the new building that will need to take place. These drawings will also have all the general requirements for demolition, code of general notes, which go into the specifics of what are supposed to be done at each of the demolition locations. If anybody has any questions throughout this is open. You can raise your hand or just yell out. Ceiling demolition sheets. That's just some symbols. So then you start getting into overall drawing, overall floor plans. This shows the relationship of the addition to the rest of the structure. There's a first floor plan, second floor plan, and as you can see in these configurations, just generally, we are essentially attaching on to that west side with a very similar configuration as to what's happening in that westernmost classroom cluster on both floors. So it's a very similar sort of philosophy, similar classroom size, things of that nature. The next sheet is getting into the enlarged floor plan. So this starts showing the details of the plan, and I'll kind of run through these with you. We've had some of these conversations peripherally, and this just gets more into the specifics of what we're doing here. So with the first floor plan, can everybody see that okay? And I'll try not to move around too much. If I'm moving around too much, just let me know. It's easy to do on the computer, and I don't want to make anybody sick. So what you have here is there will be an entrance off of kind of that southwest corner. The idea is to have a little bit of a covered entry there, doors. There will be a window in this lobby space, which we haven't carved in yet. This would be your secure vestibule space out front with a window into a secretary space, and a supervisor space would be right off of that. Through the secure doors, these would be always egress out. You could always leave the building through these doors. Anytime you have a door swinging in this direction, that means it opens out into the vestibule. Anytime it swings in that direction, you can panic out no matter what. So the classrooms, you can always get out. They can be locked from the outside, and similarly in this scenario. So as we move into the rest of the building, there's a nice hallway space down here with the doors to each of the classrooms, kind of tucked off of these corners. Get some distance between the doors from a sound standpoint, which is nice. They're recessed in an alcove, so they're not swinging out into the hallway, although that's not the end of the world either, but we have the opportunity to push them back, so we did. At the far end of the hallway, there are a couple sets of doors. This is kind of a backflow measure. So as people get into this space, there was the question, well, can people, if there was some sort of an event, would people be able to backflow into the rest of the existing building? That's what these doors are intended to prevent. So you could always emergency exit out these doors, but you wouldn't be able to get through these doors back into the existing building unless you had credentials or you were Life Safety Services. If you were a staff member with a card, that sort of thing would allow you back in the building, but somebody that is not supposed to be there would not have that ability to get back into the rest of the building. The stairs has a similar configuration on the second floor, so you can get up the stairs, but there wouldn't be much to do up there. You'd be essentially in that stairwell and contained. These doors are the added doors. This is a feature that we want to implement right off the bat when construction starts. The concept with this is you'd be able to get people out of that existing building out to the courtyard space and allow the rest of the work to the left to occur without too much disruption. So there would have to be a little bit of fencing to prevent people from kind of moving back and forth out here, but this would allow egress out of that space since we're taking away these doors here.
Brian?
Yeah.
What is the size of that storage space between those two classrooms?
This one, we're still playing with this. This is it's saying 5'4" now. This is taking masonry dimensions to the outside. We could, in theory, push this out and get a couple feet on either side, so maybe you end up with 7 or 8 feet. So you get a little bit more space in there with the idea maybe you have one side that's full of tall shelving, one side that you could push in. I think she said they have some little trikes and things of that nature. Maybe you want to set on the floor, so you would have space in there. We just are working through those dimensions in this space.
Okay, we'll have to see just what is required to be stored.
Absolutely. And the intent with these plans, getting to this point, is you're starting to get all the layers of information on here. So this is where you really do start seeing, well, I've got, these are fine, but sometimes you'll have like a 6 foot, 1 5/8 dimension in a hallway. Well, that's not what we want. This allows you to start adjusting those things and getting into some real solid dimensions, and it allows you to go back in and look at some of your casework and make sure you have all the doors and drawers and all those sorts of things that we're ultimately going to want in the project. It gets all that stuff on the table so it's visible and you can start looking at it. It also does stuff that most people in this room won't ever care to know, but like all these partitions on the inside, you can see these labels start telling us and start telling the contractor what these walls are made of, how they're built, and informs how these pieces parts all come together. That's that other layer of information that ultimately is required for construction, but really at the end of the day it will look the same to everybody else that's using it. So the way we have this carved up right now, there are the 2 pre-K classrooms. They share this restroom here. It's a large restroom with a lot of access to a changing table. It's got the sink, it's got the toilet. There will be space in here that we can put some small cubbies if we need to. Has doors off of both sides. This is a nice feature in that if you have a student and you need some assistance for whatever reason, you would be able to kind of work back and forth between the classrooms and possibly pull in somebody to assist in those types of situations. There is also a shared storage space between the 2 classrooms that we were just talking about. This size, ultimately, we'll probably want to adjust a little bit, but the concept here was you could get out of these 2 pre-K classrooms through this door, go out to recess, and then have access to shared materials and possibly some of the smaller items that go outside from the storage space. Within these two classrooms, there'd be a wall of cubbies for the students themselves. These have the bench base to them, so the student can sit down, they can change their shoes and boots, and they can put their coats and things in the little cubby boxes. Generally, there's storage on top of this, typically there is, so you get a lot of storage within the classroom. And then over here is kind of a wet area with some built-in storage, so this is, students need to wash their hands before they eat or they get done with an art project. There is a sink outside of the restroom where they can do those sorts of things, and then there's a lot of space for storing work materials. These classrooms too, they have a teaching wall at each end. Again, this teaching wall would have tacboard, markboards, and then your display surface at those locations.
Ryan,
Mhm.
can I ask a question?
Sure.
And you're probably gonna kill me when I ask this, but we did not address the fact that there's probably gonna be an additional psych over there, that there's no place for OT or PT to do any kind of work. Like the fact that we don't have an additional small office down there could be problematic. And I'm looking at Tracy cringing over there. We didn't think about, it just dawned on me now. I don't know if there's any way to reconfigure that office space. They don't need a ton of room. We need at least one more office down there, I think. I think we're gonna have a problem if we don't. I don't know where we would put all those additional people. They don't have to, they're not all there at one time, but we will have a pretty close to a full-time psych that does all preschool that will need to be housed there, that I don't know we ever thought about. Anybody else who is in the education world? Thoughts?
I guess my thought would be, we're going to have this here with an office, and we're also going to have pre-K over at Buckeye, and there could be some opportunity for shared space. They could share that office, or maybe we can address it better at Buckeye. But to start adding some more into here, you either really cramp that space or you have to put on, more space.
I mean, one other thing we could consider if the group is open to it, we could shift, like we have this pre-K supervisor down here and we have an office here. We could have the entrance off of this side potentially and kind of split the hallway, have an office off of one side, office off of the other side, and then maybe they shrink down a little bit in that space. This wouldn't have to be quite that big. We could pick up.
I would recommend that. I think it's going to be hugely problematic if we don't have a place to put that psychologist. We already don't have enough space in the Riverview.
That would be off of the vestibule.
Yeah, which is fine, that's
Okay.
okay, because they come in to test.
Okay.
That would probably be okay from a site point of view. But if we could look at reconfiguring that space, I think we're gonna be sorry if we don't put a space in there. And even if they shared us, that might be, they still are gonna need a place to work when they're at Riverview. Do you know what I mean? They need and we run into that problem all over the place. We put them on the stage at Buckeye, you know what I mean, those kinds of things. So I think if we can reconfigure that space to be, they don't need a ton of room, they don't need a huge storage space, but they gotta have a place to sit down and do their work.
My objection to the entrance going out to the west is that you have a lot of, winds in the wintertime and you're buffeted by that with the entrance facing the south. You come around the corner and you don't have that effect because it will be affected.
The other thing we could look at, if people are open to it, is we could shift this restroom inboard. We would lose the storage. We might try to shrink this down a little bit because it is fairly large. It was basically marrying up with the walls of these restrooms. And then we could put the office off of the hallway, but maybe we end up with a small storage space that's shared and then an office. Is that, you know what I'm saying? Like we'd end up with.
I do. To me, it doesn't matter. I think we gotta figure out a way to get a small office in there. I think that's a big.
Who does this, what grade levels does this site, handle?
So this particular psychologist would be dedicated to preschool only. She
We
has
have a
one
full-time psychologist just for
that pretty much
preschool.
does all of
We
preschool.
do
She-
now, we probably have 1.5.
Yeah.
It depends on,
Sometimes she'll
Where
help out at
where are
other,
they located now?
she'll help out at other buildings. Well, she's gotta be either at Buckeye or, so whoever, at Buckeye or Melridge.
It's-
I don't know, without Cheryl here to say specifically, but if we're also talking about growing our preschool program, potentially somewhere down the line, 4 classrooms in this one location will necessitate I could text Cheryl too if, I know she's doing some personal things today, but,
Well, then we just lost our storage space.
well, I mean,
You could
I don't
do
know if we're
something-
losing it, I just would like
Yeah,
him to
he just
play.
moved it, we lost it.
You could do something like this potentially, where you end up with this being an office here, a storage space here that's shared off the hallway, and then you still get your doors to the outside.
That makes it pretty cumbersome. I'd like to really discuss this further and really find out who's gonna be located where. So I'm sorry the idea came late to the table, but we can work through it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I
But-
agree
but-
with you,
But
yeah,
let's
yeah.
not start redesigning this now.
Ryan,
Mm-hmm.
so we have the 2 classrooms, we pick up almost a foot and stealing almost a foot from the left classroom, because you have 37 and 36 on the right classroom. So if you expanded, before you were talking about the storage space, picking up a little bit of room for that. If you picked up basically a foot from the left classroom and just a little bit from the right classroom, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And Tracy, if we made those rooms just a little bit smaller, would there be enough square footage? Okay?
Yeah.
So maybe if we steal a little bit from the left and right classrooms, we can maybe steal a little bit. I know storage is always an issue, right? You need storage, but if we steal a little bit from those and reconfigure just a little bit, we can create enough space for an office. How many square feet do you need for an office?
Gosh, I don't know, but it doesn't have to be very big, like, we don't have to put filing cabinets in there, we just need a place for her
Well,
to sit down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. like,
Yeah.
And I know you might not be thinking square footage, but how many feet would a person need?
I mean, I think if it came out from that, I don't know.
The size of a
we could always
table, the width of a table?
Well, it's gotta be a little bit bigger than that, you know what I mean, so maybe 2 tables and that
You could
long,
just-
I don't,
you
you know what I
could
mean,
just
to
keep
fit
the
a
storage.
small
What's
desk,
I mean,
yeah,
the length of the table?
yeah,
we
And
could
then
do
you're saying the
restrooms
width
with
of
a
2
bathroom.
tables?
at least,
Okay.
yeah. So that
Kind of
an
same
adult
thing.
and a kid could sit
Sure.
in there, at least
Like,
one, and
do
she
it on
could,
the
they could do
bottom 2
testing.
classrooms, kind of, like you're gonna do that storage thing?
Oh,
10 by
Yeah, you
20?
could totally do that.
Maybe just.
10 by 20?
You know, if you were gonna do
A
that.
6 by 7?
Yeah,
So,
that's a great idea.
Gary had a great idea over here. We could look at these 2 kindergarten classrooms, shifting those restrooms down and putting the office off of that side.
That's
Then
what,
you're
yeah,
taking
that's
out
what I
the
was wondering,
kindergarten.
yeah.
Gary,
Yeah.
you come to the rescue again.
No, that was done this before. What's going on?
I built a house before, then realized when I moved into it, I regretted every decision I made, so.
Don't
I think about it a little more.
Yeah,
We
that's,
would be sorry
Just had to
about
go,
that.
why
We
did I do
already
it this
are
way?
with the
So,
building
yeah, I think
size
that'll make
cranes
sense.
for
We could
offices.
steal from that, and these are still large rooms, so we should have space that we'll be able to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, you might end up with a little bit of storage off of the corridor too, depending on how that works out, so. Or we just make that room, that office that we end up with, have an end with some built-in storage in it, which might make sense. You have multiple people using that for different activities. It might be a good thing. Good point. Okay, moving through kind of the rest of this plan, these 2 rooms are just kind of a standard configuration. They very much mimic what's happening over in the existing classrooms adjacent, very similar. They got essentially a wall of cubbies along the corridor side, teaching walls on the ends, and then you've got a big built-in with some more storage, sinks, and countertop space. So it's very similar. So again, if we use that option, we try to shift these down a little bit, we should be able to carve in very similar space off the corridor. Maybe it changes how we look at these restrooms a touch though, to adjust those proportions. This is the furniture plan as it currently sits. You can see here there is kind of some leftover space here, so potentially shifting this down won't make that big of a deal. These do have space in them for all of the pieces, parts that typically go into a classroom. These have more furniture than a lot of schools end up with, so we could potentially pare this back if we wanted to. But these are the features that most kindergarten teachers typically ask for. It's a reading space, it's the kind of sit-down space in front of the classrooms, it's your general workspace, some break-off space so that they can work with students in a small group setting, and then some of the accessory elements, kind of the life skills elements, toys that go along with those pieces, parts as well. This classroom is set up very similarly. This one we probably want to take a slightly, with pre-K, a deeper dive into how you want those fitted out from a furniture standpoint. I don't think you're going to have this much furniture. You're probably going to want different furniture because this is set up for more students and it's very similar work settings, so we should really kind of circle back on those and make sure that all the pieces, parts are right. Roof plan, we're just taking a similar concept to what was done on the rest of the existing building, just pitching to the sides, having a couple roof drains, there'll be overflow drains in case there's ever a blockage, so real exciting stuff. It's also got all the details that will go along with typical penetrations. We will have wall sections through the building that will show your coping details at the top of the wall, that will show your interaction with the adjacent existing building. All of those sorts of elements get worked into the next layer of details. This is our ceiling plan. We have, again, taken most of the cues from the existing building to make them look similar, since that's what the intent was. So on the first floor, for example, you're kind of marching down the corridor. It's just standard kind of ceiling tile. They do have these built-in kind of soffit elements, which we're mimicking at these doors. I think will be a nice feature. It'll look consistent throughout the building. It will have a nice feel to it. Classrooms are just standard ceiling and lighting. And again, this is something we're probably going to want to circle back on. I don't know if we have the information for the actual ceiling tile that was put in there. I don't know if that was in that big packet of existing documents, but if not, if they have attic stock and we can match to the existing ceiling and existing lights, that would be a hope, so that we have as much consistency in the building as possible. The lights in the existing building might already be outdated because lighting has been changing so rapidly lately. So we might want to try to pick something that's close to looking like it, but they might not even offer those anymore. I mean, lights are changing every couple of years at this point, so it changes fast. Oh, I didn't talk about the second floor. I totally glossed over that. I'll jump back to the floor plan for that real quick. Second floor is very much just standard, essentially second grade through fifth grade style classrooms. The thing that we changed on this floor, the stuff that's different, is that you do end up with some lockers out in the hallway. We got that number that we had talked about requiring for this space. We do have a mechanical room off of the end of the corridor. This feeds the entire wing. This area down in this location, we end up with a small group room there that's for intervention, and then a second small group / project room that's off the outside, which could be used for intervention, could be used for small group, could be used for small class project, all of that sort of thing in this area. This is very much in keeping with what the offerings are at each of the classroom clusters throughout the building, albeit we don't have the large common space in the center here. The doors, again, swing out to the corridor. The one piece that we have not resolved yet on this floor is the doors between classrooms. Just wanted to double check. This is what we're showing. We're showing a teaching wall at each end. We were going to populate this with the doors so that you could do kind of that co-teach. You could do class projects between two classrooms. Is this something that we want to include?
Yes.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
At both locations?
Both,
Yes.
yeah, both sides.
Please.
And then we have it shown as two 3-foot doors that can be opened on a hold open so that you end up with a 6-foot wide opening. That works for everybody.
Is that what we currently have, do you know?
I don't know. And some of the classrooms over there don't have anything because they're by themselves.
Right, none of the kindergarten ones do, but in every pod, there's 2 classrooms that are connected.
Like this, yeah.
Yes.
So they have a double door. in
Do you
those
know how
classrooms.
big those are? Because
6 foot.
they are, the teacher said if we could go bigger, they would like that.
You
But I
can,
don't know if that's possible. If it's not, then we just stay with what.
to stay reasonable in cost, you could maybe pick up another foot. Like you could do 3 foot 6 wide doors, a set of those.
Can you do as big as you can
We
with
could
being
potentially do
reasonable?
that, yep.
Yes.
Once you get bigger
Cost-wise.
than, once you get bigger than that, then you end up with, you know, potentially needing different types of door hardware and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And-
As big as we can go and stay reasonable,
Yep.
please. Okay?
And I don't think we want to go the route of, I mean, it always comes up, you know, some sort of a overhead door or those sorts of things. Just the sound separation of spaces with a double door is better than any of those. It's not perfect because it's still a door, but it's better than any of those options. I think that's kind of the second floor. Classroom furniture on the second floor. These are exactly what was shown in the design documents for these accessory classroom, you know, these classrooms in the other spaces. So if there's anything we want to change as a group, we could do that. But we just need to know if there's something that doesn't work, something you don't need. I find that sometimes you buy a lot of furniture and then there's more often than not stuff you don't end up using. It gets pushed into a corner and you'd rather have more bookshelves or something like that. So it'd be best not to buy a bunch of expensive tables if we don't need it and buy the things that ultimately you want more. So we are missing, so can you make a note? We're missing these tables, the horseshoe tables on this side too. So.
We can definitely have a conversation with teacher, you know what I mean, like sit down with them, like we did before we opened Riverview and talk to, when we know exactly what grade levels are going in there. That's gonna dictate too what furniture we buy, because primary has some different stuff than intermediate, so.
And that's one of those things too, like, we've got each of these enlarged areas, we could go over each of these classrooms with the furniture and then, like, for example, the small group room, we're showing round tables, maybe rectangular tables are better, so you can push them together for a bigger project work, or maybe this is what you want, you know, and we
Yeah.
can just talk through that. Tables are not that expensive in the grand scheme of things, so you get your best guess now, and if you ever have to pivot in the future, it's not monumental. Those tables will be used somewhere.
Do we need cubbies in any of those rooms? No, the classrooms.
Well, what was the conversation we had about lockers?
I thought we were doing, I thought you had enough lockers, but we were gonna put maybe one.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
One half of a bank or something like that, but then we do need cubbies in the rooms, I believe.
Yeah,
So,
especially if we're not sure what grade level's gonna go in there.
do you still want the bench type cubbies similar to what kindergarten would have?
No,
I don't think so.
okay.
Just more like a stand locker
Yeah.
style with just the hooks?
What we have now,
Okay.
yeah.
Do they share a cubby or is it individuals?
Individuals.
Okay. That might, we'll take a look at that. Where, do you know where they are in the rooms right now? Because most of your walls are taken up with stuff.
They're on that hallway wall typically.
This wall?
Some are on the hallway wall, some are on the exterior.
So we might have to adjust our casework and put that along this wall as much as we can fit, and then.
Not all of them have sinks either, that was another.
We always put sinks in.
Okay.
You
I
don't
think
know,
we
you
only
don't.
put them in the rooms where we thought there was gonna be science and math, or science, but I think you're right, because we don't know exactly what these rooms are gonna be used for, it's probably not a bad idea to put a
The,
sink in each
the
classroom,
cost of adding, I mean, if we're talking about 2 classrooms versus 4,
is minimal.
to go back in the future and add a sink is gonna cost you 10 times more
Yeah.
than
Oh,
it
yeah.
is now.
They just wouldn't have a sink ever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, going back and adding is not.
Yeah, we're talking about 4, it's not 100. And so I
Yeah.
think, you know, if it came to the point where we needed to look for, you know, some value savings, I don't know if that would be my first go either. I mean, there are other things I think I'd consider before I looked at the sinks, so. But yeah, we'll adjust the casework in those rooms and we'll look at the cubbies in those spaces.
You getting notes? Good.
Moving down further, we talked about the ceilings, ceiling details. Again, this doesn't matter to anybody probably except for those guys over there. But this really starts talking about as you have these changes in planes and such, how all that gets constructed. And it's your acoustic ceiling tiles and your soffits and all that kind of fun stuff. So those are building details. These sheets getting into your elevations and sections and things of that nature. So this is, you know, the vertical aspects of the building. And what you're seeing here is this elevation is the front of the building. And so with the addition, we are just taking that same language and we're kind of marching down this corner. This is something where we've got these piers that ultimately get built up, that we're using a pier to kind of wrap this corner. So if we go back to our plan real quick, there's going to be kind of this corner and a pier at these locations, so that as we march down the building, we've intentionally put this side out proud of this space, so that there would be a difference in plane. So if there is a slight color difference between these masonry elements, you don't notice it quite as much. On the back side, we were fortunate in that the stairwell is kind of cut back into this wall. So as this masonry wraps around, you have a natural break there. So we created a semi-artificial one on the front to do the same thing. So when you're looking at this elevation, just this kind of same language is going to be marching down and creating these classroom elements on this elevation as well. It's got all the call-outs for the different masonry. This is the back side. You can see here's the stair recess. There's the door for the stair. We gotta adjust our block coursing there, but ultimately that will get toothed in. This might be the one spot at this door where we're putting new masonry cutting into that existing opening. We're either gonna have to tooth it in and hope it looks as close as possible to the existing masonry, or maybe we just put some sort of a trim element around that doorway, because it might not look exactly the same, and we just case it out so that it looks nice. But again, kind of marching down that side. This last elevation here, this is the end elevation where the entrance would be. It's a little hard to see, but this, you'd be entering in, can you see my cursor? Yeah. Be entering in from this side. We still have to work on the concept of some form of canopy, you know, maybe a pier. We should talk about whether you want some signage on this elevation, you know, for preschool entrance, or a name for the preschool or something of that nature, but you have this kind of element here. This might be a consideration for maybe you want a bench outside or something for people that are waiting, but dressing this up. And then we do still want to look at a window at this spot and possibly up on the second floor. Since that is the main corridor, it might be nice to kind of pull some window through that elevation at that spot. Moving down, these are building sections. No real questions here. These start to help us develop, you know, the various aspects that go into corridor construction. So you see a corridor, you walk down a corridor, it just looks like a hallway. You don't think about the fact that there's a whole circulation system of piping and ductwork and electrical conduits and all that kind of stuff that happens in the ceiling in every corridor. So this really allows us to start looking at those kind of cross sections to see what kind of space we can provide with the structure that we're creating, and make sure that we have enough space so that when our contractors get out there to start building the thing, they have a room to kind of work their way throughout the building effectively and distribute all those systems to each of the spaces. This allows us also to start looking at some of that block coursing that I was pointing at on that other section. It allows us to start looking at some of these details like this, where the roof comes into the existing, or into the wall, and we have to look at how that ultimately gets propped up and flashed and all of those sorts of things. So these section cuts really start informing all of those aspects of the project. These were important to get going real early as well, because these stairs are critical in that you have a stair that people pass underneath. So this section allowed us to start looking at the stair, verifying that we have enough clearance underneath the stair to get people underneath to the exterior doors and things like that. This configuration does happen in the existing building. that's out there, so it's just a matter of kind of recreating those elements in this project and making sure it works for our configuration at this location. Yeah, you can see roof slopes. This is another situation where, as you look through this, most people don't think about, but it allows you to start looking at the structure and where you want to bury your steel or your masonry or your concrete planks and how that interacts with the bearing walls and things like that. So that's really what these sections start to inform. There's a placeholder sheet, another placeholder sheet. This is a more detailed version of those sections I was just talking about. So you go from essentially just a black wall section to these where you start looking at, you have your footing, you come up with some cheap ditch block, which is just gray block. You insulate and you start working up into your wall, and that's where you start pulling in all of your decorative masonry across the face of the building. You look at your interaction of your floor construction, your floor structure, and you start populating these sections with all of the pieces, parts that ultimately are required to build it. This is also where you start making those call-outs to get you to the actual sheets where, you know, you start looking at, this is that one detail I was talking about with the roof that came across. This is how you start looking at how that gets flashed and how that gets tied into the wall system and things like that. So that's what these show.
So we have a concrete plank for a first floor ceiling, so to speak, and then just what do we have for the roof?
Presently, we're showing concrete up there too. That's one of those things that if CCI says that, you know, they're seeing that be a problem, we could shift it to metal deck and joists just as readily. If you're putting all plank out there already, it might make sense just to go with plank. So we've switched back and forth. When COVID hit, it caused a lot of projects to dance a lot. So we went from a lot of projects where traditionally it would be all steel joists and it would be metal deck and it would be, you know, concrete topper, and that's what they were. We started using beams on some projects because steel beams were cheaper than joists and more readily available because they weren't having to build them. They didn't have people to build them. So steel beams were cheaper and easier to get. Some places we went with plank because plank was more readily available. So we can adjust. That's why it's important to have your CM involved early, so if they can start checking those trends and point out if there's anything they see is going to be more expensive than it needs to be, or there's some efficiencies that can be had. That's why we involve them in the early stages of the project as much as we can. And we're to that point with this set that they can really start looking at things and game planning how to move forward. Just for anybody that doesn't know, the geotechnical borings that we do, they're essentially, they go out there and they drill holes and they check the material makeup of the dirt that's out there. Those inform the footings. So when you see a footing on a page like this, right now this is just a generic placeholder. This could be wider, it could be narrower, it could be deeper. That's all related to what we get back from the geotechnical borings. That's why those are important. Especially when concrete, I think it's $200 a yard now, something like that. Yeah. So when concrete costs $200 a yard, it was $50 when I started in architecture. So when it's $200 a yard, which is 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, it adds up quick, and you want to make sure that you're getting the most efficient, structurally viable, you know, code compliant footings you can get that are suitable for the soils. So the other thing we got to do, there's vertical sections, there's horizontal sections. These are looking at how all those bump outs are built, and again, just informing the construction process. More stair sections. These again talk about your circulation, your controlled vestibule. This is something that the card reader system that's over there, that was one of our questions. Do you have somebody that's servicing that we just want to probably talk to directly?
Yes.
Okay.
You want to involve John Renwick, you're also, and then he'll involve the companies that are currently involved with us.
Because we want this building specifically, anybody that's working on that building system, as much as possible, we want to marry up with, you know, the pieces, parts that have been put in. There's 100 different ways to do the building controls. We want to make sure that this one ties in and is as integrated as possible with the existing. We're not adding that much. There are these couple sets of doors on both floor, and then there's the controlled access vestibule up front. But it's just a matter of making sure that that all works the way we want it to
Melissa, do we need to take into any consideration of the magnetic lock on the doors, any of the classrooms, the ones that have the push button or like the green button with the code or key?
Like that first floor.
We might want to consider that if they're in the preschool rooms. Is it, clearly it's easier, I won't even start, that's a stupid way to start. Easier to do that, we might want to do that on all 4 downstairs, just because we don't know what they're gonna be. You know what I mean, like, if they all end up preschool rooms, I think that's something that would probably be beneficial to do, and then if we don't need them, they don't have to be engaged, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so it would be beneficial to put them in on the 4 rooms downstairs, I think. We can double check with Cheryl, but that would be my guess.
That would be the best, and we're gonna need them, put them in, and again, we can disarm them if we have to.
Yeah, better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them.
Exactly. There's the stairs here have like a curve to them. We have to adjust the stairs, which changes our handrail slope. We just put it back in as rectangular there, and we're going to run, there's like a wood cap at the top of the stair as it kind of comes across. We're just gonna run the wood cap across. Is anybody opposed to squaring that off rather than trying to recreate that curve?
Jim always hated that curve anyway. You always
So in
figured
honor of
it slides
Jim
down.
Hillis, no, we're fine with that.
Okay, I like this. This is easier to build. So, and it's a stairwell. It's a stairwell on the backside of the building, so it's not. I'm fine with that. Okay, great.
On the card reader discussion, the card readers would be the same as we have the vestibule projects. They were on the same system.
Good.
But as far as the infrastructure, I've never been too familiar on that.
And we can pull all that too. More stair sections. Again, this is really those studies to make sure you could get the space underneath that you need. Handrail details. These are just general. So the ADA aspect of things, American with Disabilities Act, that is something we have to consider. So I will bring that up. I'll say you can't move that door there because you don't have enough clearance for code. This is what I'm talking about. Essentially, when you approach a door, depending on the hardware that's on the door, there are requirements for access adjacent to it and behind it and in front of it. So that's really what these are providing information for. Shows your kind of reaches and your clearances that are required at each of these spaces. That's what this documents. This also includes all of your accessories. So this would be grab bars and toilet paper and all those sorts of things that need to be mounted in the spaces, which leads to another question. Do you have a supplier that for your toilet paper and napkins and all those sorts of things that provides the cabinets? So we will just need to work with you and get you the plans and we can get the models. This will go for CTE too. We're just gonna wanna make sure we get the same stuff. And what that comes down to is some suppliers, material suppliers for napkins and toilet paper and such, they will supply the dispenser as part of their package, just because you're using their product, and that way it's compatible. We get into smaller elevations, smaller rooms, bigger elevations, but really what we do, this is where we can start looking at some of those smaller aspects that need to be considered. So for example, in the enlarged plans and elevations for this shared restroom at pre-K, we can start looking at if you need cubbies. So this is almost always where we get into the table type that we want to have in that room. You know, is it a fixed leg? Is it something that's got a step? Is it something where you have storage underneath it? You want a shelf over the sink next to it? You want cubbies on the opposing wall? Do the cubbies go outside of it? Do you not even need them? But it's about having space for all of those sorts of things. So this is something that we should probably just have a small group meeting about, kind of run through these plans of the bathrooms. Rich, probably wouldn't hurt for you to be in on part of that as well, because that's something that as we talk about refilling materials for, like, sometimes we'll put a small cabinet over the top of the toilet which has some extra toilet paper or stuff like that in it. we can have those conversations and make sure that all those elements that are necessary for these spaces get there. Again, more enlarged elevations, these are the classrooms, same conversation. So this is where we should sit down and break into a small group, and we could go through furniture and we could go through casework. And inevitably, the casework becomes 2 or 3 sets of conversations to make sure we get the casework you want, because there's literally an endless number of ways to carve up the casework. What we show here is kind of the most common, generic sort of way of doing it, meaning that it's mostly accepted by most people, and it's having these cubbies with the benches and the boot boxes, storage up above, these tall elements, with the wardrobe side, some drawers, some tall storage, sink, that sort of thing. This is very common, but if you want to make some manipulation, like, for example, if you don't use all these drawers, some people don't use many drawers, if any. They put stuff in bins in double doors. If that's what you want to do, then you can save the money on the drawers. Drawers are not cheap. A big open box with 2 doors in it is cheaper. So we just want to make sure that we get what you need, and we don't buy stuff that nobody will use.
Did you happen at all to look at what's already in the classrooms?
So we're basing stuff off as much as we
What
can
you
off
can,
of
okay.
existing things. So some of this stuff might not be 100% accurate.
Yeah.
We're doing field verification this Wednesday. So
Okay.
we're going to be double checking, because even what's in the drawings we have versus what actually got put out in the field might be slightly different. So we just want to make sure that we verify
Okay.
exactly what it is. Again, some just small rooms and kind of the blown up elevations of those rooms. These in particular, we probably want to give good attention to, just because I think going into this project without having a very clear understanding of how we want to utilize these, we might leave something out if we don't. So I think they would be good to really kind of circle the wagons on that one. And that might be something, maybe it makes sense from our side of things to craft an email that we'll send to you that has the list of those rooms and those sheets, and we can kind of highlight those so that we can identify who we want to have in that
Yep,
small
that'd be
group.
perfect, yeah, because there's like, for when you're talking about the bathrooms and what do we need in there,
Mhm.
we're definitely gonna want Cheryl in on that.
Yeah, yeah.
People, pupil services and stuff like that, so,
Yep.
and the teachers, so.
Placeholder sheet. So then you get into doors and windows. Doors are pretty basic. It's just a matter of going through and making sure you have all the specific rooms. The materials are called out, swings, all those sorts of things. It shows all the details. This is where we will identify where you want card readers. This is where we will identify if there are any fire rating requirements. Some of these won't be pertinent, but it's a matter of making sure we get all that information. This I will probably start with Rich and then circle back with the group once we have an idea of what we think it's supposed to be. And then we generally put together a door document where it shows the floor plans and we color code, and like this door gets a card reader, this one gets a card reader and a video phone, this one's just standard classroom hardware. And that way everybody's on the same page as to what is being provided. This building, the windows, we will want to talk about just how those are constructed. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. They're mainly casement style windows out there now, which in an operations standpoint is a window that either have a crank handle or you manually push the window out. They're on hinges, they slide open like a door would. If we want to keep that versus if we want to have a window with a hopper, that's what we kind of need to talk about. The type of glass we ultimately put in these also makes a difference on the type of window we can do, and that if we do some very heavy glass in there, it affects what we're able to do with those windows. And we can do a couple alternates, but we just need to know exactly what that's going to want to be.
Quick question, Brian.
Sure.
On casements that don't have the crank out,
Mhm.
how are they held in place when they're open?
There's generally a mechanism, like
Oh,
almost like a door would have a
okay.
stop to it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a guide, and then you
Like
can-
the old ones?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very similar. The awning style, which we don't have in here, the awning style, it's the same thing, where they're mounted to the side, and it's either a friction or there's some sort of a hydraulic to it that holds them in place. Just some more details. There's floor floor to wall, floor to ceiling, and details that we need to work through, and that's really how the structure gets tied to everything. Signage, this is something that we want to match up with the existing building. If there are any deficiencies on the existing building, this would be the time to take care of it. For example, if a sticker came off a window, or there was one that needs to be installed, or whatever it is, we're just gonna wanna make sure that this marries up to what you have out there and ties to everything, and we take care of if there's any spots that need adjustment. Those things aren't perfect. Sign schedule. We will get into finishes too. Finishes are something that we're going to, again, verify when we go out there. If there are any back attic stock type materials for the paint, for the flooring, for the ceiling that you have that we can match to, if you want to match to it, that would be helpful so we can populate this list. If you don't want to match to the existing, we can do that too. We just need to know that so we can go ahead.
I do know that the current carpet in Riverview is obsolete and it's no longer in Shaw's attic stock within the United States.
Okay.
So we can get similar, but we're not gonna get exact.
And if we want to do that, we can, or we can make this a different brand. If you, different brand mean different look.
And we only know that is because we've had to replace a few, and I've gone to a Shaw rep, and they've actually gone to to Shaw themselves, and it's not even available. So we can get similar, it's just, we're not gonna get exact.
And so even that, if you have the make and type, we can match to the general look to it.
General style.
Yeah, and then make sure that it has all the similar features, you know, the type of backing, all those sorts of things, so you have similar,
that we
similar
have.
product. Yeah, cool. So that's generally what this is. What we will do with this as well is we will populate the list and just run through samples. So we'll have a handful of color samples, the finishes, that sort of thing, so that we can all verify that that's what we want. Ultimately, you'll have a set before you go out for bidding and a set after. So when you put this together, we're doing our best to match to the existing building. This is a competitive bid environment, so you will get some stuff submitted from various, you know, suppliers that might be slightly different. And paint's not a thing, because paint you're matching tones, that's not a problem. But sometimes the flooring is slightly different, or the ceiling tile might be slightly different. This allows us to vet that out and ultimately make the closest selections. Transitions, which that's just flooring transitions. Kind of close things off. That's just going through and looking at the materials across the board and just seeing how all those things fit together ultimately. So that is the set in effect. My next steps, well, first of all, any general questions?
I have a few things, I don't know if now is the time, if not, tell me. So when it comes to the switches for the classrooms, the light switches, they're gonna need to dim, but what I don't want to see us do is I don't want it to be a program-generated lighting system. I don't want Cat 5, I would like to see hardwire.
Okay.
This way, we have switches that would be readily available out on the market, that if we had to replace them, we can replace them and not have to hunt for them for 6 months and spend $300 a switch.
I gotcha.
What about, we've had an incident at Riverview specifically last winter where power blipped, generator came on, power came back on all at the same time. It looked like poltergeist to the school because everything was flashing because the computer system basically ate itself.
Wow.
So if we could just go to a hardwire, that would be great.
To that, do you have the occupancy sensor in the room, does that bother you?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, because generally we have to put those in.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that won't affect
Okay.
standard switch.
Outlets, can we just have them on all the time, please? And not have a bottom outlet that goes out at 5 o'clock and.
Yes, please.
Please.
Huge.
And then
That's a
toilets,
lead thing, I think.
we're slowly transitioning back to manuals, and I will leave it up to the principal and to Cheryl as to if there are certain classrooms that we have to go automated. But we are transitioning back to manual just from the fact of replace them is expensive, and we are frightening some children when they walk in and it flushes on its own. And then they don't go to the bathroom all day, which is not a good thing.
No, then it's not.
They go in and flushes.
And then I do
Yeah,
have a list of
scares me.
contractors
Yeah.
that
It's not-
we do currently use within our district
It's
that
not- it's not-
I'd like to see them get bid packages, not saying that they're gonna, bid it but there are some certain things like our security, our fob system.
Fire alarm?
Fire alarm, those companies.
And if you could send those to me sooner
I
than
will.
later, our technology consultant needs that anyway.
Okay.
Because when we talk about, in the drawing set, there's a system integration requirement, and so they need that information anyway,
Okay.
so that would be very helpful. No, that's good stuff. So what, the flush valves on the toilets, is that okay? Like, standard manual? Okay.
I know the hospitals are now switching back to manual as well.
Okay, the sinks you still use automatic?
I prefer not to, but I would leave that up to the principal and to Cheryl as to. And the only reason, it's because of its cost, its replacement cost.
Mhm.
When they go down, it's not a cheap replacement, but, if we need them for the children, then that's.
I'll have to double check that one from our code standpoint, I don't know. I'll have to talk to our engineers to see how viable that is, but I know we've done it, but I just don't know to what level, so.
Okay.
A lot of those things you're talking about, there's very much, with lead aspect of things, there's a very much a push, to have that kind of stuff, so. Whether it's functionally conducive to how you operate or not, it's stuff that, those types of programs typically include. Anything else from this side of the table? Any other questions, comments? That side of the table, around the corners? Anything? Any questions? All right, so kind of my next, my recommendation is we are at that point, we're in a really good position. We're cranking along on the drawings, we're doing really well. Engineers will be coming out this week so that they can get further along populating their documents and kind of catch back up. I would like to set up some of those small group meetings, and that is really talking about very specific little details. That is talking about those enlarged elevations, that's talking about casework and furniture, that's talking about any challenges we've had with, our flooring or, our, whatever it is. It's always flooring, but, any of those types of finishes, anything of that nature. It's also to get an idea of marker boards, tack boards, how you utilize that. That's something that certain districts put in a ton of, and certain districts don't. And it's just a matter of making sure we get kind of the right mix for what you guys are looking for. So is it best to go through you, Melissa, to help
Would
set
you
that up? or
prefer
is there
me
somebody-
to streamline Tracy?
Yeah.
And I could do that. I'm thinking we'll meet over there, obviously, but if you send me the locations, then I'll kind of say, like, who I think should be in each of those groups and kind of organize them that way. I can do that for you.
And that's fine, and then we don't need CCI for that. You guys don't need to attend that. You will be bored out of your mind. And then we'll get to the point.
Commenting on finishes.
Yeah, and we'll get to the point where we have that information, and if we have
That'd be good.
questions.
I'd like to get your input.
I mean, my thought is to mirror basically what we have. If we have to
Yeah.
tweak some of that stuff, my thought would be we want this to be one cohesive building, so we want those to be as similar.
My gut feeling was the same, unless there's stuff that doesn't function the way
Yeah.
you thought it would.
Yes,
you know, and
exactly.
you
That's
wanna-
exactly what I'm thinking too. So I'm hoping it will be fairly easy,
The
or
big-
there'll be fairly easy meetings.
The big one that we see a lot, and it's expensive, is the casework. Like you'll put in a lot of doors or drawers, one of the two, drawers or doors, and people won't use them the way they thought they would. Like they'll get a wall of doors with the shelves, and then I'll go in there a year later and you open them up and there's nothing in there. And other times you go in and every drawer is empty, but all the other stuff is packed full, and there's stuff on the counters. So it's just making sure that how you utilize your space, we kind of match that as much as possible, so we don't buy stuff that you're not going to use. So,
Okay.
and that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Budget-wise, are we still looking good?
We haven't really changed our footprint at all, so I think we're probably still in that vein. We probably have enough information we could get it to CCI. I don't know,
Yeah.
and you can start.
Going to be a request of mine if we get our hands on that now to help with our schedule and to put a budget to it.
Yep.
There's nothing for
And that's something too, that as you're going through it, if you are seeing, you know, from a wall system standpoint or floor system standpoint, if there is something that's more efficient, less efficient, you know, just let us know. We're always willing to explore the options, make sure we get the most cost-effective, durable solution. I don't think, the biggest thing on here is just really that floor and roof structure. You know, that's like the big difference from most other projects. So, any other questions, comments, concerns? This is really what I wanted to go through. Sterling, did you have any questions going through the documents? Was there anything you could think of? Try to pull up Mia's email real quick.
Yeah, I think maybe covered on the head, so.
And she did ask about door hardware. So again, I think we'll be in those talks, you know, just specifics about keying and that kind of thing, making sure we get all that stuff. The window in the lobby at the preschool, so, where's my floor plan? There we go. This window, do we just want a pass-through type window there with the little counter type? I think we had talked about doing that and maybe having a spot where you could set something if you're doing drop-off for a kid, or do we want to try to work in that whole sliding drawer?
Oh,
I
no,
don't
we
think we
said
need that
no, we
sliding
said we
door.
didn't need that whole big.
No.
So we'll do the fixed window with the communication device and then
Yeah.
just a little pass-through?
Yes, that's.
Good. I like those. ADA push button on this door. They're not required by code, but they are often used.
Well, when somebody brings somebody in, it's a lot easier for a mom pushing a cart and another
I would
kid.
too, is typically.
Pre-K is gonna have a higher handicap incidence as well.
These, they're good when they work, so that's where I think those. They fail a lot. I mean, when you think about it, it's something in our weather, in our climate with the ice and all the stuff that can catch and drag and get into those buttons, and they fail a lot. We talked
How
about,
easy are they to fix?
they're just, I don't think they're crazy difficult. There's just money each time you have to do it. That's all it is.
Have you had any experience with that, Rich?
Mhm.
And what's
I've had experience with recess to a wall to standing on a post outside. And predominantly what happens is you get water in there, they start to freeze, they start to corrode, they go bad, they short out. And then you're out getting another switch, another button, you're putting it back in.
we're just replacing that box? What kind of cost is involved there?
Anywhere, probably about 550 to 700, I think.
So we'll need a little protection from water, I guess.
As much as you can do. They,
Yeah.
Right, they're
they have
not-
weather tight boxes. You know,
Right.
it's Northeast Ohio. Room numbering, is there a specific room numbering you want to match to? Because, I mean, you're coming down your corridor with whatever the existing building is. Do you want to have different wing numbering for this, or how do you ultimately want to do that? We will want to do that, and typically it goes in a sequence, so it really depends on how we look at this space. If we're looking at these spaces as a continuation of the existing, or as coming in through the exterior doors, as to where we would start our numbering. So if you have a visitor, from a logic standpoint, what makes the most sense? It's so small that I don't know that it's hypercritical, but we try to make sure we match as much as possible. This does not need to be decided today, but it is something to think about. Sometimes like this, you might call it P101, you know, since preschool wing or whatever it is, and it doesn't have to mean anything other than everybody, when they think of P, they know which side of the building it is, that sort of thing. Light fixtures we talked about. So the second floor doors, even these doors for that matter, generally in a security environment, these can be solid. We can put narrow lights in it. Narrow lights, like the one on this door where it's like a 5-inch wide, 20-inch high, so you can kind of see what's going on in there. Do you want a window or not?
If they're gonna be open most of the time and then closed, I don't think the other ones have windows
They do not.
as well, and then there'll be cameras in the hall, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, so,
The windows on cross corridor doors are mainly important, like if there's a lot of traffic and you want to be able to see somebody coming from the other way. These, when they're shut in an emergency environment, everybody's trying to go out. Like you wouldn't expect people to be coming back the other direction. So it's pretty typical to make them flush, solid. The doors between classrooms on the second floor. These guys, do you want windows in those or solid?
They
We
cur-
have windows
they
in them.
currently
Yeah,
have
we
windows.
have-
Yeah, so, again,
Let's see.
my thought is to mirror as much as we
Yeah.
can.
Match the existing
So it's
ones.
cohesive.
And then we talked about finishes, just matching the existing. That's all I have. I think, again, we're gonna do our site work this week, and then probably another couple weeks, we'll be ready to have a very similar sort of conversation. In the meantime, probably next week sometime, I think it would be good to have that early next week, have that conversation about some of the more detailed aspects of some of these rooms. So I'll send you that list of
That's
spaces,
perfect.
and we
Yep.
can start thinking about
Yep.
where to have that, when to have that, who should be there.
Also send me what days and times, you know what I mean, in that same email are good for you.
I got 1 hour on Wednesday next week.
That's actually, as long as you get past Monday, which is our professional development day, I'm good,
Yeah,
Ryan,
I'm just
so. No, but yeah, so that I can start thinking around how we can free people up and if we gotta get some subs and stuff.
That's awesome. Any other questions for us? Awesome. That's what I had to cover. I did bring Buckeye stuff if you guys wanted to talk about any of that or not. We could talk about that some other time.
Another time's fine.
Oh. You guys, any other stuff? Any other idea of Buckeye areas?
Yeah, I think we're going into Buckeye now, right? Yeah, Kathy's first bit of
Okay.
kickoff from Buckeye.
Oh, we already did, okay, oh, okay, okay.
Couldn't remember if that got
Yeah, no, for
sure or
sure.
not. I'll save this. And this, I don't have super lot, because we haven't done a super lot of work on it. So there might not be a lot to talk about yet, but, oh man, I didn't want to do that. That's not the right one. Oh, I know what it is. There it is. So Buckeye really, the challenge we're gonna have is just how we approach where we connect, what we connect to, and then the aspects of the existing building we want to touch. So I mean, this is your site. There is more site to the north. I think pretty much anything in the trees is mostly untouchable, because I think you will find wetlands up there. Even if you don't think it's there, it almost always crops up when there's a lot of trees, dense tree cover, especially with the neighborhoods nearby. So just a consideration. The logical place to make the connection is where we showed it. I'll bring up those site plans real quick for reference in a minute here, but really the most logical place to connect is right off the end of this wing. The challenge with that are the students that are obviously in the trailers. I think this is missing a trailer. You have a trailer here too.
It is, yeah, that's
Yeah,
all
it's
the
all-
picture.
So this is the best connection point from a standpoint of getting utilities over there, not interfering with the rest of campus as much as possible. Just makes a lot of sense. We did look at some of the stuff up front. It is viable. It's just gonna be a little more expensive to do anything up front as far as like a gym, and it will be something that is extremely visible as you come down the street. So there is a lot of reason that this back location
Ryan,
makes
there's
sense.
been a request by Cassie for the gym to go in the back.
Okay, that makes it even easier. I think it will just
Right.
lay out really well.
I'm kind of torn, quite honestly. Good morning, I'm Cassie Smith, principal. Initially, having the gym go into the back does lend itself nicely just because it's an easy addition. But I also had a question if we could connect it, almost making a square so that it would, our playground would be secure in a sense, where it would be a square shaped with a kind of a courtyard playground in the middle. But then I'm also thinking too, we have our cafeteria that's already up front. We have our secure vestibule that's already up front, and if we had a gym, it would be easy access just for outside. If we have parent activities, they're just coming in the main door, going off to the right for the gym. So those are just some initial thoughts.
Competing priorities too.
Right.
Yeah, and so I could see it going either way too, because are you familiar with Gurney Elementary in Chagrin at all?
I'm not.
Okay, so my kids go there, and the gym there was put on later, and it's at the back of the building. It's not where I typically put it, but the way they did it, I mean, it does have a vestibule between the main academic core and the gymnasium space, and after hours, it's used all the time. And they just shut off that set of doors from the rest of the building. It actually works out great. I like the relationship between a gym and a cafeteria sometimes, but this building is not that large that if there was some sort of a bigger event where you needed to use both, I think you could make that work pretty effectively. So I could see it, honestly, I could see it going either location. Having the gym at the back, it does offer the feature too that if you have outdoor recess day, you'd be able to go straight from the gym outside and utilize those spaces and come back into the gym. And so there is some relationship there that's pretty nice too. So I could see it going either way. The back of the site is the easiest to build, probably the most cost effective, and I could see it functioning just fine. Some of our other challenges, you do have existing building obviously of a size. There's the utilities that go to essentially this location here. So there's a gas house over here somewhere. We will need to look at our building services. They're probably undersized for the addition. So we're probably gonna have to do some service work associated with this project. The good thing is that it's parking lot over here. It's not building that we're trying to go through. So there is the ability to get down through here and get to this back building. But ultimately, you're probably gonna have to cut in some new utilities at this location.
You also have at the end of the west parking lot there in the left-hand corner, there's a pole. Those are the utilities that run all 6 of our modular classrooms.
That's is that here? Right in this corner, or is it
No.
over here?
Right, yeah, right to the left there.
Okay, over here somewhere.
Yeah, right there.
Right here?
There's a
Okay.
pole right, yes, there's a pole right there. There's 2 separate utilities coming off of that transformer. One feeds one set of modulars, the other feeds the other set of modulars.
That's good to know.
What is our feed, you know, is it 480 into the building?
The building or the modulars?
Well, both, which one?
We have both.
480 into the main building,
Mhm.
240 into the other one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it is trenched underground, and it is trenched underneath the walkway for the modular units.
Do you know, real quick, do you know if this addition was backfed through the building, or did that go outside and tie back in? Or do you not know?
I do not know off the top of my head.
That's fine, we'll see what we can find there. I don't know what we have for drawings there, but I'll take a look at that. The other thing to consider is just keeping on this page, talking about utilities. With all the utilities coming in here, if there is anything to be done in the existing building, for example, if you wanted to, you know, run new electrical, or if you wanted to backfeed with any new water supply, gas, anything of that nature, it is all coming in this location. The challenge will be with any of that is just that existing mechanical room is pretty full. And if we're replacing a mechanical unit or anything like that, we may want to consider how, you know, this kind of corner of the building gets utilized. It may make sense to, you know, adjust some of this space a little bit so that you could conceivably build in new service to this building and then kind of take the old offline and switch it over. So just something to consider. It's just like, you know, if you're putting in a new water heater, you have to take out the old one to put in this one. Well, in this case, you're doing that, but it's all your building services, you know, so it's there's just not space to set something new next to the existing, plug it in, and then take the old one away.
If we had to, Ryan, could we bump to the south where that,
Maybe.
right there and make that a mechanical, plus a delivery space for the kitchen.
Maybe. That would end up with a firewall between it, which isn't the end of the world. But we may be able to do that. And you could do something, I keep thinking about this corner of the building is the probably least inviting because it does have the service entrance there. You got your main building entrance over here. It would be nice to kind of screen them a little bit, you know, and if you're able to do that in a way that looks nice and get your utilities and all that kind of stuff handled, you could potentially do that. And that would maybe allow us to do all the stuff we're talking about with that.
We had a water main break going into the building right in front of that door, right where that actual car is.
Right here?
Yeah. That, we had one. When do we have the next? I mean, we fixed it. Does it make sense to look at the actual
Line?
line?
It may. That's one of those that, as you're looking at these services, my guess is a lot, gas, we're probably gonna have to upsize. Electrical, we're probably gonna have to upsize. Water, we may not have to, but you may want to for that reason. And we just have to look at kind of the life cycle age of it, and we can run it by our engineers, kind of see what they expect. Was it cast iron, I assume?
No,
Oh, what was it? Black iron?
no, it's concrete line, I can't remember
Oh,
What caused it?
it's split,
Just split.
10-inch split on the underside of it.
wow.
Just corrosion evidently.
That's crazy. Yeah, sometimes you'll see, especially with the weather we've had this year, the amount of heave has been tremendous. And
Oh, yeah.
I've been hearing a lot about
Yes.
water breaks.
We're experiencing a lot of heaving around our schools.
That was a funny way to phrase it.
Even.
If everything's going in the back, is the thought that the entire front and side would become parking lot then?
So,
What-
I don't think we resolved it. Our
Oh.
initial sketches show something, I'll bring that up too.
I'm just curious what you're,
So we did some, this one doesn't really show it. I think you could. I think parking down the side makes some sense, because if
Right.
you end up with a gymnasium, let me explain these real quick. Real quickly, this is a 2-story option, this is a 1-story option.
oh, okay.
The 1-story option pushes way back, to get the number of classrooms we're talking about. It does chew up a lot of the site. If we're trying to do that enclosure that we're talking about and wrap it, that's a bit of a challenge. So, I think something.
The other challenge is if you need to use a cafeteria, you're walking that much
Oh,
farther.
yeah, it's that far away.
I mean, to your point about, let me do this. You could conceivably do something, showing you how the sausage is made. You could do something like this, potentially, to achieve what you were talking about with having a court space. Just have your pass-through underneath those stairs, similar to what we were talking about over at Riverview. So you could do something like that, or maybe it shifts up a little bit and you end up with a gate there, or whatever it is, and you have this kind of outdoor space. Could be really nice. So there are options how we do that. This option though, like it really pushes it down. I would not try to put the gym anywhere within the classroom branch. If you were to do something like that, I think this ship has already sailed, but if you were to do something with a single floor, you would almost have to do, oops. Where's my rotate? Oh, there it is. I think you'd almost want to do something like this, where you put the gym down here, but obviously we'd have to reposition it somehow. I just don't think that that works that effectively. And this corridor does get quite long by the time you get to the end of it. You think about like a kid down in this corner having to go all the way down the hallway and all the way down to the end, it starts getting a little long.
They have little legs.
They do. The other thing that we could potentially do is wherever this ends up, there is a set of doors here. We could try to bring these across. Maybe if this gym, if this gym did end up somewhere over here, you could potentially do a little walkway that gets you into the gym from a second location too. But you would be buying some outdoor space, or you could just do a sidewalk that gets you across from that set of doors, so that this walk is much less to get over to that location. So there are some options how we could attack that gym space.
I think that if you did that, which that's kind of a neat idea, I think how do you access that courtyard for maintenance or needing to get to the building or all of that? Because I think that's a key.
So we could do a gate here. If you enclosed it, it does get more challenging.
That can be overcome.
Yeah, I've done it with 2 sets of double doors, and you ultimately end up having to bring a mower through that space to get into the central space. It's not done. People do that all the time. It's just something that you have to be aware of. But the idea of kind of closing the loop, I think it has some merit for sure.
With the age of like the current boiler room and infrastructure there, is there any sense to making a new mechanical room in a new addition that would feed into the old building and then decondition the original mechanical room and expand the cafeteria or the kitchen area?
Yeah, so that's a couple of things in one question. So the reason it's a couple of things is there's the potential. It's potentially awesome in that if we were trying to do this mechanical work here, maybe we do just kind of shift our classrooms around and we glom on a big mechanical room here that kind of back feeds and feeds out into this space. The only challenge with it, and that would allow you to do all that work and then make your attachments after the fact. You could do that. The only challenge with that is you are pulling all your primary service further down the building. Not terrible, it's just a little further away, and it's, there's the cost associated with those main service lines. The beauty of it would be is then you could conceivably redo whatever you do with this space up here. Maybe you do just change that mechanical room into storage and loading, and that becomes that sort of space, and you can kind of backfeed from that spot potentially.
If you're gonna put air into those buildings and do heat,
Mm-hmm.
you would use rooftops, right, for the existing
You can.
section?
You
And
can.
then the classrooms would potentially get larger because the univents would come out.
So there's a couple of things. The plan we were showing, we were considering an inside mechanical space similar to what we're doing over at Riverview. We're going to end up with a mechanical unit inside of the building to feed the new addition. So I think you could handle that inside the building. To do a rooftop is more cost effective, but it's a rooftop, and we're kind of shying away from that with the other project. To do these spaces, again, the existing spaces, it's always more cost effective to do rooftop units. The challenge is then you end up with a bunch of rooftop units and penetration. So
That's really not ideal.
there's a challenge with any of these. That one, the fact that you're running gas lines to each of those locations, you're running electrical to each of those locations, you have more roof penetrations. There's just more to it. The one thing that is nice about a big central unit is it's a far less amount of moving parts to consider, because each of those rooftop units, even if they're smaller, each one of them has motors, and each one of them has filters, and each one of them has all that stuff. If you're able to make a central plant, you do control that and bring down those numbers of all those.
Just for ease of maintenance, inside is much better.
And again, I mean, that idea of putting a central plant here somewhere that feeds everything else, it would be a real advantage.
Right.
Hey, Ryan, can I just throw something in here?
Sure.
Could you take that, what you have there, eliminate that 90s edition, and just mirror what you have on the left side to the right side and connect it with the gym?
You could do it, you'd just be buying the square footage. Yeah, you could totally do it, I could draw
But
that.
wouldn't circulation be much more effective that way?
So you would end up with this interstitial space. I mean, it would be a nice circular, it'd be a very nice building.
Wait, they get rid, I'm sorry, Dennis, I didn't understand what you were saying. Can you say that again?
The 90s edition on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just take that away, because it's seen its day. And then we add the classrooms in a loop and with the connection with the gym.
Oh, I see, oh, okay, I wasn't following what you
Something
were
like
saying.
that.
Okay, so we'd stay all on one floor, so we
Yes.
would mirror either side.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I see what you're
it's
saying.
obviously gonna be more than just a two-story addition, but a two-story addition over there, I just don't think fits the area and neighborhood. This provides that circulation from each wing of the building. And you can go there and you can have a little bit of, common space at the south end of that gym, which would look into the courtyard. And of course, that courtyard would have your playgrounds and stuff still there. You could pull that one left-hand side extension to the west a little bit more to open that up a little bit larger. And you would have extremely nice space there, and it would be protected space.
So if you,
You would lose the 2 science labs currently in the library.
Right.
Would you have to add?
And they can be made up.
And a restroom.
so if you have, this is showing 12, 13, 14 rooms, 2 science labs, restroom, and the library. You have to make up those spaces. They'd have to.
So we're
fill
actually
in.
losing space.
Well, you're not really losing space, because with this, you have enough square footage that you can make that space up. So you're not losing, actually, you're still gonna end up plus space.
Well, if you tear down however many square feet, unless we're adding that many square feet to this.
Well, you are.
So we would be adding that additional square feet onto what this plan is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we would increase it by that much, or make that footprint that much bigger.
So if I'm.
But you have an addition there.
But you're talking single story at that point.
Single story, right, because that existing addition needs a lot of work. And why put money into that existing addition when you could just get rid of it and put new in and have a much better plan in the end?
It is, you'll end up buying more square footage.
Well, sure, we know that, but, the offset cost, what would we have to put into that addition, according to the Bioloski report? So you're only talking about not a full bag of dollars, just a half a bag of dollars.
And maybe, if you were to go that route, maybe it's something that this back wing, for example, you load up with classrooms, standard classrooms. Like maybe it's, instead of having maybe it's just a bunch of classrooms to the back. Maybe this becomes science and media center and entrance to this piece, so that there's this kind of flavor over here of those elements, and you get more of the classrooms over on this side.
We don't really use the science lab as a science lab anyway, so it's used as an
Just a
art,
standard.
you know what I mean, or music, so that would be what I would like to put way down at the end, because then you have all your loud stuff where you have say going on, gym, art, music, you know what I mean, it's more towards the end of the building.
All your specials.
Yep,
essentially.
exactly.
Where is-
This could help with the phasing too, because again, when we walk the site, what do you do with the 6 modular classrooms? There's no way we're doing this project in 3 months, it's gotta go through the school year, so if you build that wing, move all the kids out over there, and then you build the other wing.
Well, that's a fair point.
Do you have a, we didn't
So-
know.
Yeah,
we do have a plan that we, depending on when we start, we can get things, move kids around.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's really, till we decide the addition, where things are gonna go, whatever, I think we need to take a little bit of a step back and talk about the scheduling of everything, and talk about what are you gonna do with these module units, and how soon can you evacuate them, and, because that's all gonna be part of the overall. So what would the plan be with that?
So we can move out of the modular units for the next school year and definitely get that started, so we have the students out of the modular units into the classroom. It would be nice to use them as long as we could for our specials classes at times, but we can do those within the classroom. It's just not convenient, and it's loud, and it is a disruption. So the least amount of time we are in there, the better, but we can make it work. We can make it work, and we do have a plan to make it work. A lot of it depends on also timing of Riverview being done, because we're moving our special ed units back to Riverview, all of that as well. So we've got some plans like that we've talked about. What if we've got A, B, and C? What if what happens? But I think that's the biggest. When are we planning on starting this? When do we need to be out of the modular units? What do we do with that sort of? We can take books and move books, and take the library into 2 classrooms. We're going to tear that part of it down, then we need to kind of shift that plan and shift that back, because we have those classrooms and being used as well. So I think we need kind of a pretty strict, hey, by this time you need to be here and there, and we can make it work.
An overall schedule and
Yeah.
sequencing. So Ryan, realistically, whether it's demo the existing and do the two sides, or whether it's 2 stories or wherever we land with that,
Mhm.
from your perspective, what's your time frame as to having documents that are approved and ready for a building permit and pulling a building permit so we can start?
Full package or like site or, is it full package probably?
What we would need for approvals to move forward, I know
So-
there's always little
So
details.
let's talk about that real quick. So there's going to be, I would assume, there's going to be zoning and planning we have to submit to, because this is a fairly substantial change on the site. That stuff, we could get that together probably in month to 2 months, something like that, and have documents be in that process. Site, assuming that we get survey and we know what we're doing conceptually, then you'd start working on an early site package potentially. You could have that probably in 4 to 6 months, just depending on what needs to happen. And then you tack on maybe another month and a half on for finishing up the rest of the architecturals.
So realistically, you would have your plans by the end of this year,
Oh, for sure,
sometime in late fall.
for sure.
Fall of this year, going through the entire process.
So in my mind, I thought if we were able to, let me take a step back. If our plan was to move the modulars, my goal would be that we could get the summer, get the modulars moved, get your backup site started, your prep, start removing things that need to be removed, and then in the fall, you could potentially be building pad, if that's an advantage, start working some of your utilities potentially.
But what would we be gaining by removing the module this summer? And truthfully, with the overall sequencing of everything else, I'm not so sure that removing the modules this summer is gonna help the overall schedule and overall cost, so.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's
So
what
if
I-
we do the early work release and we remove the modulars, do some site work, and the drawings could be finished up, and you start construction, let's just say October, you get a little bit of work done, so the whole project could be completed the following year for the opening of school.
Potentially.
Potentially,
It's all gonna depend on what we end up, whether it's, what, 2 stories, 1 story, the
well, we
which
have
size.
to know what we're doing, and that's what we're talking about. We have to, Dennis, in this one, we have to know what we're, if we want to talk about what we're doing for another month, then everything's out of the window.
Well,
We
yeah.
have to know what we're doing, and we have to execute that. And then the key to that whole plan, really the whole key, is having Riverview done. Having Riverview open for school. That's the key. Because when you're talking about students and where you're gonna move them, that's the key.
So,
We've got some preliminary plans, even if Riverview's not done and been scheduled to open.
No, I understand
we're-
that, but
we
if
can-
it's
we've
open,
got
then
ABC.
it makes everything work. It makes it easy.
How does that schedule work for next fall for Riverview?
I mean, the way that it's setting up now, just based on these conversations, it looks like you'd be trying to go vertical in the winter of 25, 26. It's gonna be costly, just to try to keep the job going. You're gonna lose a lot of time, would be my first thought.
Are
So-
you talking about Riverview?
No, I'm talking about for this project.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Okay.
we're
So,
talking about
Riverview is
So
still
let
looking at.
me back up. So with Riverview, we're looking at opening for school.
Yep,
That's the key.
yep, we talked about winter of 26, right?
The end of August,
that's,
next year.
no,
so-
this year you're
So
talking.
August.
Well, this year, right,
August of
okay, I'm thinking right,
25.
25.
No,
That's gonna be,
Winter break.
that's gonna be
no,
tough.
August. They're saying be done
No.
with the
I thought
two-story
they said
addition
they
by the
could
end
do
of
that.
August.
Well, let's back up for a second.
Yeah.
We did the source boring, that's gonna be coming back, we released the survey. I think the survey is done, right, or in the process of getting done on Riverview?
Survey's starting tomorrow.
Starting, so the survey will be done, but you still have to go through, we gotta talk about rezoning that property. We got a lot of work on the,
So
on that
the
back.
rezoning with the county is mostly paperwork, because,
It is, but that's part of it. We
Yeah.
can't, so here's the sequencing of things. He cannot submit for any drawing reviews until the rezoning is done. So you're looking at, and you cannot start your rezoning till the property transfers into your name.
right.
And I don't know when that's scheduled to be,
Well,
but
I think we're looking at closing here pretty soon. We don't need to wait for the soil results. We don't need to wait for the EPA. Have you talked with, the weather's good this week. Is she gonna be out there this week?
I will follow up with her. I sent her an email Friday with all the final.
Because
purchase
all she
order
has
and
to do
all
is
that.
walk the property, okay? That's the assumption.
Yeah.
And so all those things should be done literally, I mean, those items in a week. And you get the closing done and you go to the county, I mean, I can't imagine them holding us up. It's gonna be more paperwork than anything else.
Yeah, but what I'm getting to is still a process.
Yeah.
So Ryan, when do you think, from your perspective, realistically, with Riverview? I mean, I don't know how many. We haven't even had any design meetings yet on that, right?
We're targeting about a month.
A month for.
Documents, CDs. We were targeting that first, second week of March.
For everything?
Mhm.
Okay.
Less civil, right?
Civil will be catching up. They're gonna be on the backside of that, so they're gonna be the one that's the challenge.
Driving the schedule.
Yeah.
Which is driving the schedule, yeah. And so you're talking about the building itself, not the civil.
More than likely, civil might be a week or two later than that.
Okay, because that's really what we need first. And you still have to have the zoning done, the rezoning done, so you can apply for the permits and everything else, which you won't be able to do till you have that rezoning done. So, I mean, realistically, I'm not so sure, if you get drawings by April, May.
Yeah, based on conversations we've already had, we looked at going in for a permit for the complete package, probably beginning of April,
Okay.
plus 30 days bidding process. We're still plus or minus 2 weeks after the end of school. So that puts you at the beginning of June for construction, for a start.
But you can't-
There could be some
you can't
early
be
release
done.
items, but
Yeah, you can't be done in 2 months, because you guys need.
Would it be
Teachers
open
need
by
to-
December?
that was
Just
always our
ours-
plan.
That was always this conversation,
Yeah.
to be done and over.
Yeah, that was the
By
end of winter break,
By the
going into
mid-summer.
That's
26.
different
Yeah.
than what we were talking about. So, I mean, if that's what it is, that's what it is. We'll have to find place for the students. But there's options, you know, it's in discussion. And there's also another option that might be showing up pretty soon, so.
So, I mean, let me just ask this question for Buckeye, because it seems like, you know, Riverview and Riverside, you know, they're set with whatever the schedules are. If you start in the fall of 25, or you start in the spring of 26 on Buckeye, is there an issue with that, or is it?
Well, what I was thinking was, if you broke ground in October, you had October, November, December, then you have winter. If you're not,
You're out of the ground and by, a couple months.
You can definitely get foundations in and
Yeah.
going vertical from that point in time.
According to your schedule, when are the modulars
we,
going to be gone?
we don't have a
We haven't
schedule
even-
for
but I
Buckeye
mean,
yet.
We haven't gotten to that phase yet, because we know there's a lot of other
Right.
things ahead of it that have to happen. But the question that I'm asking is, even if you do, let's say you do some of the demo in the fall, can we start the construction in the spring of 26?
well, that's the question. So if you started construction in October and almost, I don't want to say shut down for winter, but you don't have the additional cost of trying to fight through
Correct.
winter, and then picked up again and then finished, right? So the question is, if you did that, or if you waited till you could break ground after winter, there wouldn't be enough time if you did that to open for school.
Right.
But if you started in October, you might be able to open for school.
Yeah, I think you can strategically look at the type of work that you're performing during that period of time to try and plan it so
Right.
you're
Right,
going
you're gonna lay
vertical
it
in
out
peak
so you
time.
can complete it the following year.
Right.
I mean, the Masons will work in the winter. it'll be some cost to it, but they do. They tent it and heat it like.
Yeah, you're 25 and above, right?
It's 40.
Yeah, it's 40 above for masonry.
40?
40 for masonry.
Okay.
So
So,
realistically,
building
you
across the
you
street
could
from
do, you could do some of the work in the fall, and then wait till the spring to break ground, and then
Right.
you'll be completed the end of 26
okay.
instead of the August of 26.
So technically, if everything worked, you could have the Buckeye addition to the rear open for, January of 27 occupancy.
Potentially.
I think that would be,
Okay. And
there's a
then,
chance that, yeah.
at that point, then we move into the original Buckeye building and start working there. Because that way, then you can shift the students, and then you can get into the original building.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the plan, yeah.
It'd be helpful to understand, I mean, we just got brought on board for Buckeye, so we haven't really,
Mhm.
and there's obviously today conversations about 2-story, one
Yeah.
long hallway, 2 it's hard for us to answer that question, because if it is 1 story and it's quicker than if it's 2-story, and there's opportunity to get half done and open, then, it just depends on what it ends
Right.
up being. For us to answer, safe, yes, end of
Yeah.
26, but is there an opportunity to get something open by August? It just depends on how quickly
Mhm.
everyone.
Okay.
And we don't know the utility situation, that's probably the biggest.
That
unknown
is-
at this
That's
point.
my biggest.
Yeah.
I mean, you
'Cause
got
that
to
throw-
deal with the
getting
utility,
the
but you have
utilities
to also deal with what is it that, where you're gonna land? Are you gonna land with a 2-story? Are you gonna land with the, getting rid of the 90s edition, or whatever you called it, and going on both sides and putting your gym
That's what
at
we
the end?
need to nail down soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's really gonna that's gonna affect the overall sequencing in the schedule and how it gets done.
Ryan, when do you need that information by so you can start drawing? I mean, this week, next week, when do you need that information?
It kind of just depends on the master schedule, what our plan is. I mean, if we're trying to get it out as soon as possible, then sooner rather than
As soon as
later.
possible.
Yeah, so.
So,
But
yeah,
What's I'm assuming there's additional costs when you tear down the 90s edition. I think cost is a definite concern.
one thing you're definitely gonna add.
What's the
cost.
additional cost to tear down roughly?
you're gonna have additional costs, but also I think if you end up going with 2 single-story instead of a 2-story addition, I think you're gaining square footage, and there is some savings there too, truthfully, because you don't have an elevator to deal with. And then you when you do an elevator, then you get staircases. That's a lot of wasted square footage from the standpoint that it's not classrooms, it's not gym, it's just a staircase and it's an elevator. So there is the pros and the cons there. Yes, it's going to be more cost. It absolutely will be more cost, but I think you have some savings by not going 2 stories and going a single story on both sides.
Well, Dennis talked about a half a bag of money instead of full bag of money, so.
What's a half a bag of money? How much is a bag of money?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
It depends what your currency is.
We can run some
Yeah, I know.
run some quick numbers on it, but I don't think that. I mean, there is some savings by not going 2 stories, and I think there is some savings with that too, as far as it's going to be quicker, construction wise.
To go to
To go
story?
single story
Okay,
versus
alright.
versus the 2, you're going to eliminate the elevator. You're going to get more. You're going to gain more square footage, usable space. So I mean, it's something to truthfully consider, and that's why I was getting to where I was going with it is, with Buckeye, what is the critical timeline, and are we better off taking a little bit of time now in looking at these different options and spending some time on it and giving you some realistic answers instead of trying to rush into this thing and
So logically, if you build the west wing first, you can take the students out of the east as you demo and move them over. But the question is, would it be completed? Because that really wouldn't be completed, right? You're gonna be in the process of building the whole project, right? You're not gonna have classroom space to move kids.
you're not gonna be able
It's
to.
not
get
gonna
occupancy.
happen. So now now another challenge is, how many classrooms are being demoed that we would need to move kids to? How many rooms is
8.
that? That's huge.
Are you talking about the temporary ones?
So if you keep the modulars for another year and you just take down the 94 section and build out of there, you're really only taking 2 sections and in the library, which also has an office, but that's easy to absorb.
You're a better
Um,
human being than I am.
I mean, that we can do with the modulars and all that. We would still potentially have classrooms on the modular for one more year, but we can shift that. We went on the assumption, when we did our exercise, that we would get rid of the modulars and moving through there. So it's just a shift. It's a numbers
So
game.
you're talking about moving the modulars?
We were talking about moving kids out of the modulars, but keeping the actual structures and using them for offices.
No,
for
what I'm
special-
saying is we have to create classroom space because we're gonna lose a lot of classroom space in this building. Now we have to have, what'd you say, 8 classrooms?
If we move preschool out and we reconfigure, we can get all of our academic classes, K through 4, inside the building. We already worked it out. We got the map out. we
With the
talked about
demo?
it. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. We can get all of those kids out of, now what Chris is talking about is,
Not with the demo.
Not with the demo.
Yeah,
oh,
not
if
with
we're
that
doing,
wing.
if we're
So
getting rid
two-
of the library.
So that's just 2 more classrooms.
If we just
yeah.
remove the
No, that was-
modulars,
that
right
was
now, we're
three.
able to.
No, but I'm saying if we
6.
demo that wing, how
With
many
6 buildings,
classrooms is
right?
that?
That's, I think we had it because we were gonna potentially use the library
Correct.
too, weren't we? So you're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6.
We would have 1, 2, 3,
I mean, that's what I'm trying to
4,
understand, the
5,
schedule and why there are.
art
Is
music
it-
one.
Depending on where.
Okay,
the
so we
building
would,
went.
we would need space for 5 classrooms if we're demoing. That's gonna be a big deal. It's gonna make it
That would, you're right, that would change
very
things.
cumbersome and next to impossible without some provision for that.
Is it possible to reconfigure that addition to kind of still do what we want without tearing it down?
So here's a thought. So Riverview having some extra space, you could move some kids over to Riverview. Was that part of your plan already?
No,
Okay.
we don't, that's.
So you're gonna move some, because we're gonna have classrooms at Riverview that would be available. You could move, you're saying 5 classrooms. If we had to, we could take those 5 classrooms, generally speaking, and move them to Riverview. I mean, you have to figure how you're gonna work classrooms are gonna be and all that sort of thing. But, so you have that option, and then is there an option to rent classroom space that is outside of the building? And have you ever talked with the church across the street on Coleridge?
No,
Because they have how many classrooms there?
I'm not familiar.
4 or 6. So there is, real close to the school across the street, a church that has some classrooms there. And if we could rent those, then they would be right there and we'd be able to move the kids. So I guess maybe I need to look into that and find that answer out pretty quickly.
That, it is challenging to move kids. When we had Hale Road, we had to do with Hale Road, we moved some kids to Lamuth, and we had to bus them. It's challenging logistically from a standpoint, from a busing and transportation standpoint. To move them to Riverview would be really tough. They would lose a lot of instructional time riding the bus, because I would assume they would go to Buckeye first, get on, like transfer buses in the Buckeye line, and then go to Riverview after
If they're
that.
going to school at Riverview, why would they go to Buckeye first?
Because of how they pick them up in the neighborhoods and the buses that transfer.
I mean, you couldn't do bus routes just to take them right to Riverview?
And it's for a temporary period of time.
And it would end up being.
I mean, my goodness, you'd just have to do bus routes. That would be.
You would have to send them from a location then, Scott. You couldn't send, like, you couldn't say 4th and 5th grade is going, based on what you're saying, because the routes pick up all the kids. So we could do what you're saying, but then we have to move by neighborhood. And now we're talking about,
Yeah,
we
it's
might
like
have 5
temporary
kindergartners 3 second graders, and 8 fifth graders. Are you following me? Transportation would be a nightmare if, they would have to go to Buckeye first, because half the kids would be going there, and then we would be moving on if we went by grade level.
So you wouldn't redistrict at all, in a short, and for a year, you would.
That would be a conversation for that guy.
We would redistrict and then have to redistrict again.
Yeah.
That would not go over well with this community. Even if we
Okay,
said-
I know it's a lot
yeah.
of work, so then the question is, do you have kids have less instructional time and with our performance in a district?
I
don't
would,
think
I
that's
would not
acceptable.
advocate for that either. I would advocate for trying to keep them and doing some shifts and seeing, give us the numbers and let us kind of work a little bit.
Okay,
to
so
see
what we're
we can-
talking about here, Roger, is if we tear down that wing and build two wings and a gymnasium, we're in a world of hurt trying to, where we're gonna put kids.
Well, when you say tear down the wing, you're talking about the 90s edition,
Yeah.
right? But so if you keep that, but you get rid of the modular, that's not as
That's
bad.
not a big deal. That would pretty much already have figured.
Could,
If
I
we
don't
built out,
understand, I don't understand
if we
that.
built out the other side first, so
Yeah,
we took
that's,
the
we would want to
modulars.
bird
Yeah.
the east side first anyway, because we'll never get back there if we build. it.
Yeah,
We have to, it's almost like you gotta demo the, if you wanna demo the 90 structure, demo, and leave the modular for a whole nother year.
Yeah.
And work your way
So-
around and out.
so
Because that's
if-
big equipment, that's not just like a.
Right, so
forklift
from
back
the
there.
construction perspective, that's the more ideal way to go.
Potential, it'd be helpful if maybe Ryan put 2 or 3 concept, just one sheet concepts for us to, this is all new to us.
Right.
Today's
So
our
if-
first day looking at Bucket, we've
Right,
heard of
right,
it, but
right.
we've not seen, I mean, I walked the building, but I've
Right.
not seen what the intent was. It would help to understand that way. We could put a couple budgets, because cost is an issue. but
Right.
Single story is going to be faster, no elevator, no stair, no additional steel decking and pours. And then we could look at scheduling and how we could potentially sequence it to accommodate this
But
challenge.
just
The
from
challenge is
the,
students.
just from the helicopter view,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
would go
helicopter view, yeah.
in, work from the east and your way around.
Potentially.
And then once that's there, then the modulars go out. So we're gonna have the modulars for another year,
Poten-
probably.
Yeah, I mean, the utilities again come down to, like, we don't know how that 90s building
Right.
is fed. If we're building a new structure, can we get utilities to it, and if it's over there, so there's a lot of things that have to be
Okay,
answered.
okay.
Can you relocate the modular? I don't know what they are.
No, we talked about, that was a question I said, and he goes, if you try to move it, I think they fall down, they're
Yeah,
at their
they're-
life cycle.
And
Those
then,
modules can't be
to
relocated, 'cause that's in the
relocate them for our use is horribly expensive. We wouldn't get anything
Yeah, I'm not
done,
even
so-
sure what they are, so.
But is
Yeah.
that maybe, I mean, that's 6 classrooms, right?
Yeah.
The
You
we
could
have
function
another
if you-
one,
if-
we have another one out there too,
Right.
yeah, so I think there's 8
Yeah.
classrooms out
6.
there.
Six.
These-
Oh,
I think
six.
these
We
are
have
4
3
and
third
that
grade
one
and
is
3
2,
fourth
yeah.
grade, 6
Because if
classes.
those stayed and we built a whole new wing, that's you're only then taking library and 2, is that probably manageable?
That would be
Correct.
Yes,
manageable.
that would be
But
manageable.
moving preschool
Because in
out,
the
yeah,
end,
with those-
in the end, would you have a better facility that way?
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and we could manage if we did that east side first.
Right, because then you'd have room for those 6
We're
people
not
to move
losing
over.
this, we're not losing
Yeah.
6 classrooms.
We'd have to have a construction entrance that goes
Yeah.
up and around.
It'll
But
be
you
tight,
have,
it'll
you
be
have,
tight.
well, you have all the land back there for,
Is there another entrance back there?
no, I don't think so. But you don't use that whole back field.
Not at all.
Because we could just go out, we could put a trailer there.
Yeah, you
When they
could
did
do
the
all
modulars,
your
that
construction
was
equipment and lay
First problem
down
with that is the
back
utilities
there.
over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, once everything's done, we'll redo those into ball fields.
Yeah.
So keep
Right,
that in
work
mind.
our way.
But the access on the east side of the building will be tight, because there's a ditch there.
Yeah, we would just
About
come
the
all the
property
way. We'd
line,
be coming
yeah.
I would come from the west side by the modulars.
Yeah, we'd have to create a construction entrance that goes around and, yeah,
But once you convert it into, I mean, you're not gonna be able to convert it.
just to
into
avoid
one,
relocating
but
kids, which is
But
a
what
nightmare.
we're talking about classrooms and then, I mean, that would be the issue with it.
Okay, so next steps are,
So, just,
It's a,
just to close the loop on Buckeye, is phasing it into two different phases that's gonna go over a certain period of time is an issue, not an issue? If you leave the modules up and running for an extra year, and you just do, as your first phase, you tear down the 90, you build your new classrooms there, and then you move them into those, and then you tear down the temporaries. Is that an issue?
That would be my preferred, route going forward. And it seems like from their standpoint, may work the best. and-
But from the administration's perspective, as far as logistics, is that a better solution for you? Is that a worse solution for you? What?
Well, if you're creating more classroom on one wing before you do the other wing, then there would be space, right?
Right.
I mean, that would work, I think, for us. One of it is just some rough budget numbers.
There's gonna be cost implications.
Yeah,
to
that's
that.
why it's a,
That's a significant, what we're looking at from the
So
whole
it
standpoint.
really
Can't
comes
do
back,
everything all at once, you know.
you get the infrastructure,
The infrastructure.
yeah, just again, back to the utility part of it.
it really comes back to,
What we have and we don't have.
well, what we've been talking about for a long time. We do a visual, okay, this much to do and this money to do it with. And so as we get into a project and we say, gee, we would like to do this, 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 and this, and the project goes from this to this, then it prevents us from doing things in the future that are necessary to be done too. And so it's a question of how much money do we want to spend and how much do we want to harm our ability in the future to do the other things we need to do. So we can spend money, sure. And do we have the cash? No, we don't. We have to borrow it. So the more you borrow, the less is available in the future to do the other things you need to do. And so that's the question. What's the value system? Do you want to get things done in the future, or do you not want to get things done in the future and get what you really want right now and spending in this project? And so that's what it comes down to, because shoot, we had a $98 million report, right? That an engineer's report of things we need to do. Now we're looking at, just in a static picture, approximately $5 million for Riverview. Yeah, I know we have the cash for that, but now we're looking at approximately, depending on what we're doing here, approximately $14 million that we would borrow. We start moving that into $17 million. That's going to inhibit our ability to do other things. My concern is, we're gonna spend more now and be able to do less later? Or are we gonna refine this and do what we need to do to get the job done now so that we can do other things later, or not have to defer as long until we do those? So it's a general concept, but the money is money and how you spend it is important, and so that's the question. Where do we go? What do we do? How much are we gonna spend? We're talking about extending the construction project a significant number of months, right?
Yeah, potentially, it's
Well,
very hard. Today's the first day we're.
You are, but you're not also, because you're gonna be, no matter what you do, you're gonna have a winner to contend with, and you're gonna have to do some phasing, no matter how you look at it with Buckeye. So I think what we should probably do is get a couple of options from Ryan as to if we were to tear down the 90s addition and do the 2 single-story versus doing the 2-story and the gym in the back, because it seems like these are the options on the table, right? It seems like that's what we're moving towards. Either one of those two.
Right. So we're gonna have a gym either way. Okay, we're basically gonna have a minimum of 12 classrooms either way.
Is there, just thinking out loud in terms of, is there a way to keep the 90s edition but build the concept the same, where you have the courtyard and you kind of close it off? And maybe put it in with the hallway and all of that? I know there's some issues in the bio, but most of the issues in that BioAlaska reports with the 64 stuff, there's some with the newer 90s, but I'm wondering if we can maybe do. I like the concept of single floor courtyard. I think that's especially for an elementary school. I think that lends itself even to out yard, like outdoor learning and a learning environment and all that. They've tried to do some of that at Buckeye. I think if we could, but I don't know, I mean, is that something that's doable where we keep?
Well, that 90s edition, it needs a new roof, it needs a new heating system, it needs new windows. So you're putting a lot of money into a structure that functionally is in the way. So,
How much would you figure?
Could you convert it, Ryan, on the inside, the 90s edition? Is that, could you convert it into reconfigure it into classrooms or something, or no?
I'm gonna do this.
oh, it already has 2 classrooms and a library.
Yeah, let me-
Well, but what I'm saying is get more classrooms out of it,
Let me do this quick.
you know?
But like I say, the money you're gonna put into that, why not put it into new? Because you're only looking at, if you have a $250 remodeling cost, when you could do a new addition for 4 to 5.
The only advantage of it is you already have all the outside walls and you're working inside versus you're working, that's the only advantage. If you can convert it into what, eventually what you want it to be.
Well, if you wanted to, there's all kinds of things you could look at, but it's,
In tearing it down and rebuilding, what kind of approximate number would you say that adds? Instead of keeping the walls and going?
Cassie, just a quick question.
What
How
would
does
you guess?
construction back there affect
um,
playground time? Recess?
Substantially, I mean, it
well,
butts
it'd
right up
cost
to.
you about $150
Playground
more a
space.
square
Then we
foot
would
to
have
build
to, we
new
would have to have space, correct?
than to
Most
put
likely.
I
money
think
into
if you're
that.
tearing it down,
And
it's gonna go up.
honestly, I don't know where that space would
No,
come from unless
because
we
if you
move them
bring
into the way
the
back.
existing building up to speed.
Which then you're crossing
spend
where construction
$220
equipment's coming in
Right,
and out.
Well,
So
unless
if
we
you just
go
get
way,
rid of it,
we can,
you
we
can
can,
get in there.
we can go way around.
let's say 450.
It's
But that is
500.
You're not,
something to
I don't
consider.
think you have enough space on the east side to make that.
Automatically without the tear.
So, so
It's real tight, you got a
you
hole in
have,
your way.
I mean, just the minimal time that the modulars were being
you're
placed,
paying more for new.
that
How
was
many
much
square feet?
smaller.
I don't
How
know
big
many
is
square
that?
feet
Is that
That's
space?
maybe about 5 or
It's-
6,000 square feet,
affected.
that addition. The
So let's
original
ju-
building's like 20.
So let's say it's 5,000.
Okay.
And let's
I
say,
mean, to your question,
you
Roger,
have to
you could
figure-
conceivably just,
that's
you have
one
2
thing.
classrooms here, you could make this a classroom. You
approximately.
could build a
because it's
classroom
tear down
here,
and whatever.
and then
So
push your corridor.
you gotta
through.
figure you're probably.
That's what I
That
was
was,
starting
that
to
was
look
my
I'm just
thought
looking at a
initially.
general
is
number,
to
you're probably looking at 1.5.
turn those into spaces.
So now the
Because
question,
then you'd have 4 classrooms.
how much?
And
do we
just
want
add to the back of it then?
and then along the
I
back
mean,
of
we
the
could go to
corridor.
probably 15.
You're filling in this
I wonder-
corner.
We
We
don't
probably
need-
have to, this would be this would get some
There's
work.
a way they're gonna contribute.
This would get some real work.
Yeah, I think
But the rest of it,
they're gonna contribute to the operations.
what's this look like?
But then those
Forget.
two, you could cut the work off, Ryan, and still
Yeah.
keep those 2 classrooms open, which helps a little bit of.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to see what my structure does there. That's my biggest
Right, yeah, if it's all.
hold up. It does not say.
All of those additions really didn't age well.
Well,
Well,
they're shaped funny.
Yeah.
What a disaster that addition is.
Yeah, it's-
The only one that seemed to work is the one at Riverside.
And I mean, you could conceivably notch in here and have 4 classrooms push out that direction.
You could add more, when you build 2 more classrooms, you get your 6 on that side.
Yeah, I'm trying to
It's
see
a
how
lot
that.
cleaner.
What's the cost to tear that down and prep?
Big hole and some trucks.
Did Mass demo a building?
Couldn't even give you a budget right now, I'd have to take a look at it.
Well, I mean, a
Yeah,
rough number.
It's, the earthwork guys take them down pretty cheap, as long
Yeah,
as
pretty
they're,
cheap.
as long as they're not hot, I mean, maybe.
And that one
5,
isn't.
$10, yeah.
Yeah.
it's
Build a
not
night.
hot.
I
It's not gonna
mean,
be.
you're almost to this point. Like, I mean, you could almost make this and this look the same.
Right.
You get 4 here, like it's real close.
But it's like adding on to a,
And that's always a question too, you start getting into.
I'm looking at the long term, we want something that's gonna be 40 to 50 years out,
Yeah, that's the goal.
and doing this just doesn't reach for that.
you do something new, you want it to last long-term. And you don't want to be having problems 20 years down the road.
Well,
It'd be almost new, because it's not like the walls are bad,
Well,
if we're cutting into it and we're putting new mechanicals.
years
and-
But then you have the outside that doesn't match
Yeah,
anything
right,
that's
nothing.
new.
It doesn't look, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's a.
Yeah. I mean,
tough.
it's had its day, it served its purpose.
You gotta look at it.
We got our money's worth out of it.
so I mean, what we could do is, yeah, we have these images we can send over to you. This is all we got, so we're not much further than this. So it's a
No,
matter
but
of
that's
seeing.
enough, I mean, that's enough for us to,
Ballpark.
it's not like we're trying to get down to pennies here. So,
Right, yeah,
you
we're
know,
just looking at
if
it.
something's 10 million or 14 million, we can.
Is it gonna be feasible or not?
How quick is it gonna,
Yep.
construction on this?
Because I mean, probably the biggest, there's two big elephants in this room, and they are what we ultimately end up doing inside the existing building. Could be minimal or huge. I mean, the costs that go along with that. And then the second big one is what you do to the site out front. I mean, that quite frankly gives me as much angst as anything else, because there's a lot here. It's not very well configured. There's not a huge amount that you can do with it because of the shape of it. I mean, you can get it more dense in here. You could get some parking in the middle. You can make this a primary loop, some parking out here. It's just very expensive to do all that. So I mean, you could make it better, but
But that could be something that could be done
yeah,
5 years down the road.
it can be. And
Because
it's
we're
just-
gonna gain our parking with the new addition.
Yep,
So,
you will pick up parking with the new addition.
Enough parking, when we talk about Riverview, and we're already talking about Riverview parking lot is never big enough, if we're building a school that's the same size, roughly as Riverview originally, not Riverview expanded, Riverview originally, what size parking lot suits that? Because I feel like the Riverview and Parkside parking lots are huge compared to this. We're not picking up nearly that much space, are we?
So take a look at how many classrooms are in the modulars right now? 6? Okay, so they're already there.
Yes.
So you have parking already for that, and if you're putting, really adding 6 more classrooms, and you're gonna add, what?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
40 more spots?
At least potentially 60.
40 to 60 spots, you're gonna have, yeah, more than adequate parking. Because what you're not doing, Melissa, is you're not creating 12 classrooms, because 6 are already there.
Okay, so we only have a net of 6.
Net 6 plus.
Okay.
Or
Thank you, that was-
depending,
yeah, okay, that
depending,
makes
I mean,
sense,
it
yeah.
might be 8 plus because what's going on, but still, you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
adding that many.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And you will get more construction.
with a demo or
I know that's always, it doesn't matter how big you build a parking lot, it's never big enough.
Except for at the mall.
Yeah, exactly, where they have tons of extra spaces.
That's designed for
Are we about
2 months out of the year.
wrapping up here?
Well, I think
20 years.
but Ryan, you bring up a good point, like the mall is not for 2 months out of the year. We have parent nights and things like that.
Yeah.
That's when parking's gonna
Yeah.
be tight. There, and just potentially having a plan. Because that will be, that's when we hear about it at Riverview too, is on school activity nights and all of that.
You just, I mean, in here, well, both schools for Riverview is same. Like, there's no on-street, really. Like, there's nowhere to
Yeah.
put people. So it is a challenge.
But that front parking lot can be reconfigured at a future date.
Could be.
You know, because when money becomes available later on, rather than taking too big of a bite of the apple at once. Let's take care of our immediate needs, and then we can reconfigure the parking.
I think the thing we would want to do, though, Dennis, is just see the number here and then think about, like, I don't know, what's a parent night that you guys have there?
We have open house, we have.
Yeah, one of those nights, and then think how many parents you anticipate on a night like that, and just see how our parking marries up to it. You're not gonna be perfect. There's not been a school
Yeah,
built
no.
where it has
No.
enough,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
There's been something like my kid's school, they have staggered starts and all that stuff, and it's stuff you have to do.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. And they have a ton of parking. So real quickly, to kind of close the loop from our side, we can send over those plans, CCI and Roger, and I guess the goal would be to come up with some ballpark pricing off of those. And then probably, does it make sense to just have a really simple one-line schedule of kind of how we anticipate things, spring of 25, summer of 25, fall of 25,
Yeah.
and just kind of put, kind of what we're thinking of in those timelines.
I think we can do that with Riverview and Riverside. With Buckeye, until we determine which one of these options we're gonna go with, we really can't develop that schedule. So I think what we need to do is we need to come up with some dollar figures, and then we will work internally on that, come up with the options for the owner to kind of make that decision, because Buckeye is gonna depend on which route we go, as to when we can start construction. Do we have to phase it? Do we not have to phase it? Can we do it all in one shot? So I think that's gonna all get reflected with that.
If we tear down the 94 and rebuild it, and this is an ignorance question for my full disclosure, we're adding a whole lot of classrooms and all that. At what point does the new section outweigh the old section, so we have to upgrade the old section to hit code? And I guess that's a class for
Technically, you wouldn't have to.
Okay,
Because
because it's all
it's a
additions?
separate building.
Okay.
These are gonna be looked at as two
Because of the
different
hallways
buildings. It's just like
Okay.
CT. It's
Okay.
like, if we go into the existing building and we start doing substantial work in the existing building, that's when you have to start worrying about codes more. And there's the way this is set up, it always used to be in the building code, there was a section where it would essentially assign points for life safety things primarily, and that would dictate what code aspects, you're trying to get to a certain number, what code aspects you had to follow in order to get an existing building to kind of comply with the code. The challenge with stuff like ADA is anybody could sue you at any time for any reason, no matter what. That doesn't fall under the same guidelines. But building code is a different animal.
So going back, even if we went back, like the mechanical room, as one of those attachment points went back and backfed the building that way,
Mhm.
which makes sense, especially if you're gonna put both sides, we wouldn't have to do anything at that point, or maybe because. no.
Mechanicals, they might not make us do much
Okay.
regardless, just because it's replacing a system.
Okay.
It's like if you were reconfiguring classrooms substantially, probably they would. If we're changing out flooring and lights and ceiling, they probably won't make us do
Okay.
anything, because those are finishes again. But if you're changing the use, so for example, if the east wing all became offices all of a sudden, then that would be a different
Okay.
use, and that's when we get pushed into it.
What's the cost difference between 1-story and 2-story per
That-
square foot?
That's tough.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, 'cause
It's really-
it was brought up that the 1-story is gonna be less money than the 2-story.
It's not I'll answer that. Basically, what you're doing is, it's really not a per square foot, because you have to look at exactly what you're building and how you're building it. What you're adding is, you're adding the cost of staircases, elevator,
Yeah.
and an extra slab, pretty much. Structurally, it'll be more too. So the best thing for us to do, instead of just trying to square foot let us take those two options and give you the cost based on those two options of what they would be, and that's gonna give you a much bigger, better picture of your total cost.
So
That-
to that point though, I think if you look at it very simply, there's a tipping point, where the elevator and the stairs are no longer cost prohibitive, and you do pick up on that 2-story option. That's why we end up with 2-story options on a lot of schools, because there's a tipping point. The question, I think, becomes on how many classrooms we're adding, and if that's
Right,
at that
that's
tipping.
why it's not an easy per
The-
square
so-
foot question.
The tipping point, if it's a bigger square footage that you're adding, that you can absorb it. But when you're doing a smaller size addition, that cost goes up on a per square foot basis.
Okay,
Because there's earthwork and foundations that still have to happen, even if this just single story, so it's a menu. We can put it together and do the side by side like we did for the CT building.
and maybe the dumbest question yet, but, we keep talking about building a single story over here and a single story here and the gym, or a 2-story over here. I mean, what if we did the 2-story back here? You took this offline and you just did that? Because then you wouldn't be, I mean, it'd be pinchy around your playground. You'd have to shift this over, but theoretically, you could make that work. Does that make any sense to anybody? What's your gym far away?
Well, here again, I think it comes down to the circulation. You're either on one side of the building or you're on the wrong side of the building.
Mhm.
So with this, if you have that loop, the circulation is complete.
Mhm.
You can have easy access from each wing to wherever you're going. And that to me is the advantage of that.
But like, I would wonder, like, if you did that, you could conceivably do your walk across here, like an enclosed walk with maybe the media center off of that, and then your classrooms, so that it would loop back on itself. It's just a thought, and maybe
It
nobody
just
likes
puts
it.
the gym far
Puts it very
away
far
from
away. Puts it very far
For like
away.
an after-hours accessibility
Yep.
perspective.
What if you do the gym out of sequence, just what if you did all that with the classroom, right, but you left the gym
That's a good
here?
question,
The
too.
classrooms could be done first, kept the modular, and then just build the gym on it.
Put the
Oh,
gym
that's
on
an
the-
easy,
box.
that's an
The
easy,
gym's
attach-
easy construction.
that's
I
an
know
easy
not, but it's just a
attachment.
big box,
Yeah.
there's no code, I mean.
Yeah,
you know,
no fancy stuff,
Lights
essentially,
stored in
yeah.
walls.
Gym would be on the left side where we wanted it.
Then that brings the gymnasium back down to the middle of the.
And that gives you great night access too, because you put the gym on the left side, you can park right to it, you could actually corridor it off or vestibule it off, and now you have an accessible gym for after hours.
Because you technically have a gym now, so you can,
Yeah, it ended up like here,
Yeah.
and then if you did,
and put the classrooms on the other side.
Well, here again, you lose that access to the fields. You want these kids to get out there and play, and now they have to walk all the way back there. So it's not gonna get used. If they can just open the doors and go out to the ball fields, go out to the basketball court, to go out to do whatever they do, we can put a trail through the woods, they can walk through there. I mean, it just makes more sense to have it out there. And if you're gonna have parking back there anyway, parents can walk a little bit farther. You can have an entrance door down there, even if you needed to for after-hours stuff. So there's a lot of things that can be worked through. But I mean, just from a functionality standpoint, I think the gym in the back is the best.
Yeah, but it's still in the back, just not as far.
So, let me ask you for cafeteria, if the classrooms were on the east side, how does that work? Does it make a difference for cafeteria use?
I wouldn't think so.
Neither way, it doesn't matter, okay.
Scott and Dennis, do you have an idea of what repairs we would then be moving forward to do inside the building? And is that a consideration when we are talking about the addition? Do you know what I mean? Like, so when you talk about,
It's
you know,
a
how
big
much money.
consideration.
Okay, so what we want to do inside, just because I don't.
We've been
I
giving it
haven't
a lot of thought,
Okay.
and we just, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into that.
Right.
And so, we're working on it.
Okay, I just wondered then, does that affect at all any of this other stuff?
Well, it
I don't know.
There-
No?
It's
Okay.
not just one item, like, it's not just the cost, it's not just the money, it's logistics, because how much work can you do? How much disruption would there
Right.
be along
What
the
can be
way?
done in the
Yeah.
What's the timing of it? All of that comes into play.
Okay.
So again, while we would love to do everything,
No, that's what I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. And then when you talk about ball fields and basketball courts and stuff, is that, what, are we assuming that into this cost of the
No,
addition?
I
Okay.
no, because it'd be a
Okay.
relatively low number.
Okay,
If you're just
They can
creating
just have a
soil
grass field for
and
now.
grass,
I
oh
mean,
yeah,
it could-
absolutely, I
could be
don't
that
disagree
even,
with you,
right,
they
right.
can just run
I mean, it
around
could be a
out there.
soccer field.
Okay, okay. Are we done?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry.
all right, so we will, we'll send those sketches over. I guess from your side, just let us know, if you have any questions as you're looking at it, any assumptions. And then we can regroup and kind of talk through, what you find. Does it make sense? I mean, with this too, we've talked a lot about, it feels like positives, negatives from a building standpoint of the various plans, but I mean, from a construction standpoint, as you're going through it, I mean, to the point of the elevator is a cost item, the stair is a cost item, you know, but then you do have double roofs or footings, or, I mean, does it make sense to just kind of have that list? Because I feel like those are the questions I would ask, you know, what are the positives or negatives of these two plans, other than just face value and
Well, I
cost?
mean, according to your information, your knowledge, of course, that's helpful.
Mhm.
And then also general dollar amounts.
Mhm.
Because we're already talking in, you know, it's a circular conversation. And so how many different items are in there? How do they fit? How do they apply? What's the money difference? What's the chronological time difference? What's the effectual difference? You know, what's the site plan difference? You know, and you have all of these different facets involved, and so a few notes might help.
Yeah, I would put some context there. for sure.
We'll definitely, we'll present that with it. When we give you the dollar options, we'll have a list of pros and cons, let's call it, or whatever you wanna.
Right, and one major item that we have to deal with, because we don't have space, we're trying to create space. We don't have space, if we have to move students, how many students do we need to move and when do we need to move them? So that is also a major consideration in what we do.
Well, and that's where the.
That's
in
part
part
of
of
the-
the-
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
the
we-
evaluate- I-
yeah.
I
That's
know-
gonna be part of the phasing that we're
Yeah.
gonna discuss.
I can't build a construction, but I can tell you how long something's gonna take, so if, you know, one's 4 months quicker, but it's $1 million more, that there might be value in being able to get students moved, right? So we'll put it, it's gonna be a menu that we have.
Right.
And I think we have
you
to
know-
know the configuration in order to understand
Right.
how we're gonna move.
Yeah, we
things.
can work with
Right.
almost anything.
Yeah,
to get
right.
things
We
to
just
work.
need to
Our
know what
teams
we're
are
working with.
incredibly resilient and know that if there's an end game,
Yeah,
that
there'll be
there's a lot
much
to
more,
work.
yeah.
We just need to know kind of what timelines are. We'll make it work.
Yeah.
That's
So-
yeah.
So what makes sense to you is important,
Yeah,
okay? Because this is what you do. Okay, so,
that's all I do.
so, yeah, what makes sense is very important.
Time is money too.
Time is money, and then what are the trade-offs?
Yeah.
When you have parent nights and stuff, you accommodate them in the existing gym, right? And
That's, I
what,
mean, that's what we, yeah,
what, do you have space issues when you have those
absolutely,
occupancy, they're standing room only and all that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Ideally, how many more parking spaces would you want to have?
I mean, you think about like a Veterans Day assembly when we have, I mean, they're parking down the road, they're parking at Coleridge, they're parking at the crime lab.
So as many as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
As much as possible.
That's the end of
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
look at Riverview
Please
and
and thank you.
Parkside.
Well, I think you'll get a lot.
People park on the grass, but I think
Yeah.
on that last Friday, or Friday before,
Yeah.
so they're at Parkside. And luckily, we got there early.
Yeah.
Spot.
I mean, even, you know, like when we have Valentine's Day parties or holiday parties, those are at the end of the day, and then you have transportation coming in for bus pickup, and that can be a nightmare for a parent pickup, drop off,
Yeah.
buses, people leaving.
So I guess it always comes down to how much money do we have and how far will it go?
Yeah, and then once we get that, even just the beginning conversation with CCI, this information out there, I mean, this is a big undertaking, this one in particular, and it's not going to be all painless. You know, we gotta go through the process to get to the point where we have the information so we can make good decisions. And it's good to have all these different ideas and concepts, and, I mean, have an open mind and talk through these, and, you know, maybe we end up back where we started, and that's good too, but, you know, just at least going through the process, seeing all the options, seeing how they weigh out, and then, you know, making our best informed decision, so. I think this is as much as I would have hoped we could have come out with today. I think it's a really good start.
All right, well, good job.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks.
Oh, are we scheduled